Well, thanks for joining us, Anthony.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
Great journey that you've made to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
In these strange times that we're experiencing right now.
Well, yes, but yeah, don't get me started.
No, that's why you're here, to get you started.
All right, okay, fine. Oh dear.
Are you like you're not a panicker? You're not a. I don't know. Do you think how bad could it get? Or
I'm the first person to say you don't panic buy, you don't do all these things.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. It's ridiculous. And woke up on Tuesday morning this week and said to my wife, I'm just going to get a few extra bits in.
I think that's what most people have been doing.
And I went to. We've got an Aldi and a Lidl in Home Firth near where we live, and they're very close. They're literally walking distance between the two. And I went into Lidl thinking I'll get an extra one of these, and I'll get an extra one of them, and I'll just make sure there's a few bits and pieces. And I started off like that, and that was fine. By the end, I was just chucking it in willy-nilly. So we got to the end, and I got to the checkout in Lidl. And this is going to sound very northern, but I got it, and she said it's 95 quid, and I'm like, how the hell do you spend 95 quid in Lidl?
It's quite easy when you just double what you were gonna.
Well, I doubled and tripled, so I got home and like now.
Do you think that's subconsciously what you've seen in the media then?
Like
Australia, for some reason, thought.
But I'm not that.
We're going to run
person.
a toilet roll.
Yeah, well, I bought 18 toilet rolls, but I'm not that person. I'm not
No.
that person. So why did I do that on that particular?
Maybe
day?
because you've seen other people do it.
I woke up and I said to Al, I said to my wife, it's going to kick off today. Something's going to happen today. Somebody's going to say something about the fact that it's on its way and it's going to kick off. So before it kicks off, I'm going to get in. I didn't buy any wine.
Wow.
Why do you buy?
The priority just down.
Why do you buy a canned product and not buy wine?
That's interesting.
But
Well, I think we all have a responsibility to just keep washing our hands and just being sensible,
right,
don't we?
All right. So I was at the football yesterday. I'm a Sheffield United supporter.
Yep.
I was at the football yesterday, and we had the thing at the beginning where footballers are now not shaking hands.
They're just giving a nod, was it?
So they're giving a nod. So they walk across, they do a nod or whatever it was. Not shaking hands at the beginning. End of the game, they're all hugging.
And when they score,
Yeah. Well, at the end of the game, every single one of those players who didn't shake hands at the beginning either shook hands or had a hug or did something with every other player on the pitch.
yeah, so they might as well just shook hands at the beginning.
You play football for 90 minutes and suddenly you're not a coronavirus risk.
Shouldn't they just have used hand sanitizer before they went on, and then when they came off?
Because hand sanitizer is now a black market in Sheffield, so that's
I think it is everywhere, to be honest.
Yeah. It's got 80 quid on eBay.
I saw something ridiculous
Just
like that. But people go to the extreme of buying they'll have 30 bottles of it at home, which they're never going to get through.
Yeah.
But which means normal people who just want to buy a couple can't buy any.
Can't buy any. Yeah.
So they're not helping really, are they?
Yeah. This podcast's really going to age well, isn't it?
It's what we do on here. Don't worry about it. No,
Good.
but that's what we've got going on at the moment. We've got to deal with it.
Well, I found myself doing it. So I found myself getting absolutely sucked into it, and I don't know why, because I'm not that person. So
I think it's a subconscious
Yeah,
thing.
I think it must have been. It must have been. But I'm great. So if anybody wants soup, it's funny because I then found myself thinking, shit, I'm just doing what my parents.
Yeah.
So my mother, who didn't live through the war and was born in 46, and I went to her house a couple of years ago and just happened to open the cupboard and thought, soup, and went to her and said, Mum, you've got 14 cans of soup.
Oh, I heard this on your podcast, yeah.
and she was like, no, I haven't. You've not counted the stuff under the stairs. And it's, and I'm turning,
it's an age thing.
I'm
It is an
turning
age
into
thing.
that person. Anyway, which, by the way, you're not, because
I'm nearly 40.
Are you?
Just turned 39. I'm older than I look.
Decent moisturiser.
Decent moisturiser.
Really been used in this place.
But anyway, because you're here because, you used to work for Shure.
I did used to work for
Who make the microphones.
Yes.
We do have an SM58 somewhere.
Everybody's got one.
Yeah. I contacted you ages ago.
Yes, you did.
When you worked for
When
Shure.
I worked for Shure, yeah.
About having because I wanted to have conversations with all sorts of people like PRS and companies that work in the music industry, but you never really hear from them. They just sort of do their job, and you don't hear. There's no spokesperson really per se for them. So that's what I wanted to do.
Well, Shure as a brand they're a brand that delivers something or they give you something that works every single time.
Yeah.
And is designed just to do the thing. It is what it says on the tin product. Consequently, though, we're not. Or I'm still saying I've not been there for 6 months.
Yeah, but how long were you there?
14 years.
Exactly.
Right. But they're not. they're not somebody who they're a little bit risk averse, and they're quite risk averse in terms of the things that they say out loud. So consequently, they don't say a lot out loud.
Okay,
so the products do the talking to a certain extent, and Shure was very much and is a manufacturing company.
Yeah.
So which sounds like, of course, it's a manufacturing company. They build things, yes, okay, but they're
also a brand.
Yes, they are, and a lot of manufacturing companies actually turn and end up being very good sales companies as well. So, Apple are absolutely great manufacturer, but they are a really, really interesting and really way out there.
They engage
retailer.
with their audience and the customers.
Yeah, and Shure was always really and still, for my money, is still a manufacturing company first and foremost, and they would probably say that themselves, and they're very proud of that, and they've got every right to be because the products are absolutely.
They've got the reputation.
Yes, but we and certainly. They do voice of authority stuff, so they will talk on issues where they feel they can share a message about best practice, but they don't have a kind of a not a fun side, but take something like Greg's. Greg's got great social media presence all over the place.
They like
really
to take the mic.
Yeah, exactly. And they, it's not saying it's a fine line, but they play with the image a little bit. And what it sure isn't a company that fits necessarily into that camp,
which is fine.
We all need good stuff. That
it's people, as long as they make good products, that's all people really care about.
And that's exactly what people care about with Shure.
I also had one of the Shure wireless guitar systems.
Right.
The
okay.
GLD16.
GLXD16.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Best thing
Absolutely
I've ever had. Best one I've ever had by miles.
Well, funnily enough, there's a story there, which is a kind of a there's a story there for people of my era. So I grew up through musically grew up through the 80s. I became a big Marillion fan, and I'm not a prog rock fan, but I became a big Marillion fan. And then through my Shure thing, I got to know the band quite well. And Steve Rothery, the Marillion guitarist, uses a GLXD16 system, and he rang me and said, "I need something to take to South America because the kit down there is awful. And if you can give me something that I can take that's not ridiculously expensive, I'll use it for those shows. If the worst comes to worst, it doesn't work when I get there, fine, we'll go into local stuff. But if I can." And that was 3 years ago, and he's not stopped using it yet. And it's played everywhere. I was in the audience at the Albert Hall when he was using the system with my fingers crossed.
Yeah. And they're very reliable.
They're incredible.
My story is I first had one of those, was it UHF ones?
Yeah.
The sort of analog.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, because they're quite expensive, and I was thinking, do I spend the money or do I go for the cheap option? So I initially went for the cheap option.
Yeah.
And then two things happened. One, we went to see Annihilator in Glasgow.
Right.
And they were all using it.
Yeah.
I was like, everyone's using it. And the sound was incredible. Then the next week, I had a gig, my system, in Trillions in Newcastle. I plugged it in, we were doing a sound check, and just heard, "Sharon, can you pick Mr. Simpson up from 42?
Yeah, you don't get
I was like,
yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know that at first. We did try, and I was like, "That's my best guitar system picking at the local taxi firm." I was like, right.
That's an age.
So that was the final nail in the coffin, and I just went and bought it, and I never looked back.
Yeah, no, they're incredible. Absolutely incredible systems. And the digital systems are
A
fantastic.
tuner as well as your wireless guitar system.
But the thing is, the digital systems, so I don't want to get into the mechanics too much.
Do get into that. That's what we do here. You can do whatever we want.
So you have a companding circuit in a wireless system, which basically squashes a signal down for transmission, and then it sort of uncompands it or opens the signal up at the other end. And in doing that, they struggle with things like guitars because it struggles with fast transients. So if you sing normally, mono, whatever, that's fine. But if you do multiple strings, or if you say jangle keys or what have you, it will distort because the companion circuit really, really struggles. And that's where the digital systems, which don't have companion circuits, they work absolutely great. So people go to digital, particularly for instruments, because you've got that like shimmer and shine on the set strings.
You don't lose any quality whatsoever.
No.
There's no delay. There's nothing.
No,
it's just flawless.
Wireless systems really struggle with chorus and heavy delay and what have you because of that thing with the transients. So the digital, the only downside is that, as far as I'm aware, and I might be technically getting this wrong, but you can't do it as well with in-ear systems because of the latency.
I never quite got to that point.
You mean you're not using an in-ear system?
No.
Oh, you need to use an in-ear system.
I wore earplugs and we had really good PA. So
you need to get to in-ears.
Yeah. The other thing I did was we played in Belgium in a big warehouse, and when we were doing the soundtrack, I went right to the back. Yeah. No signal loss whatsoever, no delay, nothing. It's perfect.
No, they are incredible systems. Absolutely incredible
systems. What was your job title when you were there?
I was...
Or did you have a few?
Well, for the last 5-6 years, I was sales director, and I specialised with the retail side of the business. So I was dealing with the PMTs and the GIF musics and the guitars and all those kind of people. So, but I mean, over the course of my time there, I've dipped in and done bits of installation. I've been some of the pro staff, all across the board. When I joined, the company was considerably smaller in the UK. So Shure's big
worldwide
thing, based out of Chicago. And then the UK business when I joined was Shure Distribution was actually it was Shure, but it was QSC and it was Radial and it was a lot of other brands. So we were a third-party distributor as well.
Okay.
All that pared back over the time. Shure's absolutely grown massively in Europe, and we sort of segmented a little bit into what we did. And my background's always been retail. So I used to work for a company before Shure called Academy of Sound, and if you go back far enough, there was an Academy of Sound in Preston as a retailer, and they were a sort of a 10-store retail chain. So my background is purchasing actually in terms of that bit, and then because I'd known Shure when all that Academy of Sound was bought out by a company called Sound Control, and they fairly impressively went bust about 18 months later, and I ended up looking for a job, and I ended up at Shure, and then the rest.
What was your initial role when you got to Shure then?
I started in commercial, so what was sort of installed for things like pubs and clubs. We sold a lot of QSC, so there was a lot of big heavy amplifiers for, because at that point in time there was still quite a vibrant sort of nightclub scene before, and we were just in that transition where we were going from nightclubs to things like Weatherspoons and what have you, which would be open all day but would then turn into a club at night. And we were just doing fit outs of those. And then obviously Smoking Bang kicked in, those kind of venues started to shut down a bit. The need for amps in quite the same number disappeared, and I just transitioned over back to what was MI retail.
The Shure's expanded their range of products as well, it seems.
Oh yeah, moved into digital conferencing, moved into digital processing. So moving into ceiling line arrays and what have you for boardrooms. I mean, huge focus on the sort of boardroom and how we communicate via things like video conference and what have you.
Whilst maintaining their reputation for the microphone.
The thing is, Shure do build very great microphone capsules, and by that they do what they're supposed to do. So,
so they got a patent on a specific unique thing that makes them unique.
Well, I mean, if you take something like the SM58, then there's patents on that particular capsule. So, in terms of that thing, that was one of the first mics that was really great on handling noise, and it had a very clever system in there that allowed noise to be dispersed back out through the microphone, not be captured.
Became industry standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly recording wise.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were the first people really that came up with a microphone you could hold in your hand if you go back far enough. Yeah. So that whole thing, that's absolutely the history.
And the wireless version of it, the wireless SM58 now seems to be very popular.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, people sort of talk about. You have a lot of conversations with people about, well, okay, what's the magic behind a wireless mic? Why would I use a wireless mic? And people will come loads of different reasons. I mean, in reality, a wireless mic is just a microphone without a wire, and it isn't any more or less complicated. Where it becomes complicated is if you want to use 40 or 50 of them in one go. Yeah, that's when it becomes that's when it becomes an art. Because actually getting 40 or 50 channels out of a small amount of radio frequency or of bandwidth is that's a skill. Shure's never always. At some points in time, they've been ahead of the curve. In some points of the time, they've not. But what they've always done is brought something to market that actually did the job it was supposed to do, and that's why pros use the product.
Exactly. They don't need to do all that PR and sort of. I don't know. They could start making fun of themselves, but they don't need to. Well, they don't need to do anything like that.
Give the situation we're in now. So I'm using the Audio Technica.
Yeah,
so there's an Audio Technica, and it's picking up my voice, and that's all a microphone's supposed to do. So it's doing exactly what it needs to, and there are plenty of microphones on the planet.
Loads.
If you're going to take a band out on the road for 2 or 3 months, and the stuff's going to get thrown about, it needs to work every single gig, and that's where Shure built its reputation. But then part of that came from the fact that they were a military supplier through the war. And when you built stuff for the military, it had to be built to a certain spec. So now Shure's very proud of the fact, and rightly so, that you can take the microphone into extreme conditions in terms of heat, in terms of
and
cold.
that need's never going to go away, is it?
No, of course it's not.
No.
And
they've nailed it.
Well, all those things that they did to make something, okay to be used in war, in the theatre of war, means that the chances are it probably should work on a rock and roll kit.
Yeah, I mean it's heavy, the SM50, but it sort of
no.
feels like a sign of reliability.
they're a great thing, and it's a great brand. But I mean, just to make the point, it's still, you're not buying it, and you should never buy a microphone really because it makes you sound a certain way. A microphone should make you sound like you.
Yeah, it shouldn't. Well, unless you want it to.
But
for generally, it should just make you your natural sound. It should just mimic that.
Yeah, exactly.
Allow you to get it out. Same with like a good amplifier.
Yeah, they just reproduce what you're doing. It's just allowing you to. Now, where Shure went out is twofold. One is the thing is virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
But two, if it says it's going to pick up in a certain way, it will pick up in a certain way, and that's really important if you're doing live sound, because if you've got a bass player to one side and a guitarist to the other side, and you want to reject that sound, then that mic needs to reject what it says it's going to reject. Because if you're front of house engineer, you don't want all that crap in the mix. So that's where they're good. They're good because they do exactly what they say they're going to in terms of performance, and they don't break.
They certainly don't.
So
would you say you were proud to work for them?
Oh, I had a great time working for Shure. Absolutely fantastic time working for Shure. And I think I find myself in a situation now where not working with the brand for a number of reasons. It was the right time for me to. It was the right time for me to move away.
Well, this is what I was going to talk about. It seems like from the outside, you made a bold decision to just step away.
I think when you've been somewhere for a long time, what you find is that you have very definite views and opinions on the way the company should move forward, and particularly in the area that you work within. And there comes a point in time where not everybody within the company feels exactly the same way that you do. And what then happens is you find yourself
frustrated.
No, but I think what you find is that every day's either going over the same ground, or it's a debate that stops being a fun debate and starts almost just being a fight. And we arrived at a situation where I had definite views on where I thought the company, or certainly the UK part should have been going, and it didn't necessarily align, and we came to a very grown-up decision between us that maybe that wasn't going to change anytime soon. That maybe I'd always not quite be in sync to a certain extent, so we worked out a way to allow me to take a move away. And
6 months later, does that seem like a blessing in disguise?
I didn't think I'd be where I am now 6 months later. So I absolutely fancied a rest. I mean, I had a look, as you do, when you're in this kind of situation. I had a look at where I was sort of financially, and I had a look around at bits and pieces. And one of the things I was doing was looking at the HMRC app just to check on a few things with regard to tax and this, that, and the other, and realised that I'd paid in 30 years worth of national insurance.
Wow. So
I did a year before I went to university and paid in a full year's NI when I did that year. And then while I was at university, I worked most of the time I wasn't studying, which meant I ended up paying full years then. So as it turned out, even though there was 3 university years in there, I've actually done 30 years of NI payment. And when you look at that, you go, I probably can have a few months off. I can probably take a moment just to. Because
I don't think a lot of people get the opportunity to do that.
No,
even though sometimes it's what they would need, but they just can't.
Yeah, and it is that thing. And I've listened to so many people who retired who've gone, I don't know how I did my job before because I have been so busy since I've retired. And
I've heard that as well.
And you look at them and you go, well, that's just.
The level of stuff that they're filling their life with, though, isn't the same as a career, though, is it?
No. I mean, what are you actually doing?
Gardening.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. I mean, a day to plant.
Geraniums.
I know. If it takes you a day to plant 18 bedding plants, then that's not filling.
I know. I've often looked at some people like certain old people who obviously retired, and you're driving past, and they're like polishing their door handles at 8:30 in the morning. You think, I don't want that to be my priorities when I get to like 70, 80.
No. I don't
know what I want it to be when I get that age, but not cleaning door handles.
I'll tell you what I don't want to do when I get to that age.
How old are you?
I'm 48.
Okay.
I don't want to go shopping on a Saturday and block the aisles with my trolley for 4 things when I could have gone at any day through the week.
Yeah.
So I need to remember those things that I've ranted about now. And say,
we all do some of them at some point. It's like turning into your parents, isn't it?
And it is that. Whole, it is that. Yeah, no, I get it. It's that whole thing. But I don't want to be that person who could go on a Tuesday when there literally is nobody there.
Yeah, I agree.
And yet choose to go on a Saturday, and then literally have 3 things in that trolley.
So when you left, what did you have a plan?
No.
What did you think you were going to do? Was your wife
really,
saying, you better find something to do?
I really didn't have a plan. It fell at a nice point for us because we were literally at the point of paying our mortgage off.
That's right.
So that changed the whole dynamic because there wasn't a financial kind of cliff edge moment, which is great because then suddenly you don't jump into anything.
Yeah.
And you wanted a little bit of a rest. I had some things, just some general housekeeping, just some stuff I'd wanted to do for a while, which everybody has.
Which a career sometimes gets in the way of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to reacquaint myself with my kids because I've been spending 110, 150, 120 nights away every year for the past 15 years. So it was just nice to be able to. And you do what you do. So like I do an under-7s football team, which I manage, and I help an under-13s football team. And I did my FA coaching badges really partly out of guilt. Partly out of guilt that I wasn't there.
Right, okay.
Well, not. I mean, I love football, but what you end up doing is when you're not there for 3 or 4 days of the week, then you say, right, well, football training on Friday, I'll come and help. So I'll be that dad that comes and helps.
Oh yeah, I see.
And then very quickly you end up thinking, well, actually, I've got a bit of interest in doing the FA, so I'll do the coaching badge, and then before you know it, you're doing those kind of things all the time. And as I say, certain bits of that were about compensation. So I wanted to kind of reacquaint myself with the family a little bit more, and actually live a life that didn't involve the suitcase permanently being in because
far away.
It never went away.
Yeah,
it never went away. And it'd be you arrive home on a Thursday, and it'd be that thing of, well, I'm going again Sunday night. So the first thing before we do anything else, I need to think about what have I got to get ready before I go again.
Yeah.
And
so you worked away and stayed away and then came back?
I didn't work. So I was either, this is the weird thing, I was either away or I was at home, which seems like an obvious thing to say because everybody's either away at home. Yeah. But what it meant was I was either away in a hotel for 2 or 3 nights or I'd be working from home. So I might be Thursday, Friday, I might have been working from home, and that was absolutely great. But I would still have been away Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it would have been. And there was quite a lot of European travel in that, some international travel, or transatlantic travel. So it was nice to do that and start that bit again. And then apart from that, I had no plan. I had no plan whatsoever. And a friend of mine, we'd been talking, and she'd been talking for a while about starting a podcast. And I sort of said, well, look, I've got gear. I've always recorded myself. I've always recorded songs and what have you. I've always had some stuff floating around. Let's try it. Let's kick this. Let's just get together. We'll set some mics up. Let's have a go. And then we spent a lot of time talking about what we think this thing wanted to be. And I'd been really interested in corporate use of social media for a long, long time. And I'd actually
what would be examples of that?
Well, I'd tried a lot to move it forward within Shure. So we'd hired. I'd hired a girl called Mary Spender for my team. Now Mary's she's a YouTuber, podcaster. She's a singer-songwriter, guitar player. She's just, I think she's just smashed through 250,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Right.
So she's, but when I met her, she was 8,000 YouTube. But it was so obvious when you met her that she was just going all the way because she had such clarity about what she wanted to do. And she came on board, and that then it was a time when I was starting to get really interested in about how all the mechanics of that went together and how retail will work, or rather how this will work for, say, MI Retail moving forward. Because in our industry, it had always been artists. So you had endorsements with artists. But that's kind of all, as far as I was concerned, that's all gone. And at the point where artists actually had control of their own image and their own social media, and they had control of how they were represented.
And their own music.
Then suddenly you were... Now, what was interesting about that was if you had a managed artist 10, 15 years ago, they would happily go. So it's two stages. You either had an endorsement that was organised through a management company, because at that point in time an artist was managed, or you got an endorsement with somebody who was on the way up, who was just so pleased to be endorsed that they would do whatever you asked them to do. People moving forward don't work that way, because if a manager told an artist to do something, then they would just do it, and then there'd be some kind of financial thing that would go on. It'd be fairly shady. It would happen in a back room, and the artist effectively signed away. Now artists have got full control. So you've got brands who are trying to work with artists who don't really understand how to do it, because in the past it was really easy because it just involved a bit of a transaction over here, and now artists are going, well, my credibility is that's my livelihood.
They've got to get much more involved now.
They've got to get far more involved, and it's got to be a far more organic process, and it's got to be a far subtler process.
Because musicians these days have got more of a business head than they've ever had.
Absolutely, but I think they also, the slight issue, the only slight issue for somebody moving forward who is in that situation is, if you're going to sell out, you can only sell out once. Because your audience, who have got a direct relationship with you now in a way they never used to have, will take a dim view of you selling out. So if you're going to do it, you don't do it for $5,000 and a load of free guitar strings. You know, you've got to do it for $1 million and just say, right, I can live with the fallout then.
Yeah.
But it was just Mary came in. She got involved. I then started getting really interested in how she was plotting her journey, and who the other players were in that space. And through Mary got to know quite a few of them, and then got really intrigued by how it all bolts together. But
the initial idea was a podcast.
No, the initial idea with Mary. Mixing two things. With Shure, Mary was just because she was doing something that was interesting, so we wanted to get her in to help us understand how we could do social
Brands
media
having
better.
podcasts makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, and Shure does have one.
Because how many people, like, when gamers would like to hear the programmers or the game designers talk like that, people want to hear who the product makers and designers.
And Shure does do that, and has spoken to a lot of artists and a lot of particularly things like record producers and mastering engineers and what have you. And that talks very much to
the musicians definitely want to hear all that. Have they got a podcast? Did you
Shure's
say?
got a podcast. Yeah, it's
called?
It's called Signal Path.
Yes, I do know of that. Yes, yeah.
And it's good. It's very good. And it's very Sure. There's a good level of detail.
Corporate.
Yes, it's. I wouldn't say it was ridiculously corporate, but there's a good level of detail, and it talks to people who are very established in a particular space. So I started working with Mary, and then was open up to a lot of other people. So I'd got really interested in just how the mechanics of these things worked, how you built an audience, what you had to do, why content was different on different platforms, why the time you posted made.
Because it's so wide open now, isn't it?
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
so many different ways you can do it.
And just things about consistency of content and what you put out, and the mix of your content being it. Part personal, part work, part
and not oversharing.
And all those kind of things, which so, Mary opened my eyes to a lot of that. So I've been quite intrigued with that, and so I've been chatting to this friend who wanted to start something, and she's a personal brand coach. So she works with individuals about their personal brand. What are the things that are important to you as an individual, and how do you maintain your personal brand if you work in a space where there's a very strong corporate culture as well? And it might be that you're trying to maintain your own brand values when you've got a very strict set of brand values going on within the space you work in. So she'd been talking about doing this thing for a while. We started talking about, okay, well, how do we think this could work? And we talked about it would be great as sort of case studies. So to take examples of people she's worked with and how they'd use their personal brand in the space they worked in, and how these could be something that would help educate other people and give examples.
Like
to
set
other
a
people.
precedent for it.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, it was never meant as a idiot's guide to personal brand. It was never meant as a, okay, well, in this podcast we will talk about this element of personal brand. This one. It was more just
this is how this person did it.
Yes.
And then you have a completely different way of doing it.
Exactly, and in different spaces, and how their personal brand has affected their own particular journey. So,
and like what sacrifices have they had to make to get there? All
of those kind of things. So we started off doing this, and I was just said, well, look, I'll help you out for a little while. I've got some time, got the kit. I'd love to actually.
I bet you've got so much kit at home.
I've got a reasonable amount of kit at home. I've got a reasonable kit at home.
You know, like people have them arsenals of weapons
Yeah,
at home. You opens up, it's like mic racks on the wall.
Yeah. Well, I've gigged as
Big
well.
long boom mics, shotgun mics.
I've pulled this book in the library and then
the back cave.
Yeah. No, it's and obviously but and from gigging as well. Yeah, I've got
That's brilliant.
I've got kit. So we started doing this, and it's proved to be a fantastic success. And she's about 11, 12 episodes in.
So it is a podcast.
It is a podcast. It's up and running.
What's it called?
It's called On Brand With, and the labor.
So does she host it?
She hosts it. I sit there.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yep.
With a slightly more reduced. Ours goes in the rucksack.
Enough that you can see over the top.
Yeah. We're not doing multicam. So we started that. She's about 11, 12 episodes in, and that's going absolutely fantastic. And as that started, then another person said, "Well, I've been thinking about this. Would you be able to help me with mine?" And then it was another person who said, "Well, what about potentially helping with this?"
What was your experience with actual podcasting at that point?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. Audio, yes. So experience
the
of
recording side of it,
recording, editing, all those kind of things, yes. The experience of actually sort of taking something and getting it out there and how you promote and what have you, very, 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 very slim. And so I found myself kind of accidentally having a small podcast business now because of the things that have come up and the people that have asked me to help them with something. Now, it's very fledgling at the moment, and I don't know if it'll go the distance. And it has the advantage that to a certain extent it's scalable. So if something else came along, I could mess about it. But Deborah and I are still working on one. I've launched a podcast of my own in that time.
I've been listening. It's good.
Thank you. But then little things like I was chatting to a chap, a real old friend of mine, called Jason Hunt, who has an event in Birmingham called the Guitar Show, and it's just been on it. We've just had.
Is that the guitar show that's been national for a while? There's a few different.
No,
we have a guitar show every year. There's one in Newcastle.
Yeah, there's a Northeastern guitar show. I mean, there's lots of guitar shows. His just happens to be called the Guitar Show.
Okay,
so he's got that name.
So this is a new thing.
No, he's been running that for that's a good question. I don't know, but it must be 6-8 years, maybe, probably longer in Birmingham. Right. So he has this event in Birmingham, Bingley Hall in Birmingham. Great, absolutely fantastic. And I was talking to him anyway, just a general kind of chat and a catch-up. And I sort of said, I've been recording a podcast for a friend, and something else has come along, and I might be doing 2 or 3 more. And he said, well, that's funny, because people have been saying to me, I should do a podcast for the Guitar Show. And the issue for him was he's got an event that, 1 2-day event a year. So he has a real ramp up in his social media, 6 weeks, 2 months out, and then he does a couple of weeks sort of trail off. But he's got this audience. He's got a YouTube audience, and he's got a Twitter audience, he's got an Instagram audience that kind of just then sit there, and they ramp up a little bit before the show, and they ramp down a little, but he's got a core of an audience that just sits there all through the year. And he sort of said, well, people have said to me I ought to do something. I've said, well, you absolutely should, because you've got the thing you need. You've already got people, and you've got people for whom this is...
For things like that, you don't need all this.
No.
Just because one of those Zoom recorders.
Yes, sir. Funnily enough, I have one of those.
Yeah. Simple.
And so we went to the show last week, I went down to the show last week, and we interviewed for the weekend, and we took the artists that were at the show, and we said, right, well, let's talk to everybody that's here.
So what was your setup? What did you go for?
That I used a Focusrite, little Focusrite, and I used 2 Beta 58s. For no other reason, nothing wrong with SM58, slightly narrower pickup pattern, so it just got rid of a little bit more of the background noise. And a laptop, and it just all goes straight into there. A couple of stands, a couple of windshields, and that was a lot. And we sat in a cloakroom, and it was a cloakroom. Though for parts of the year, I think it's also some form of cat's home, because I think they had a cat, and there was cat litter in the corner, and there was a cat litter tray.
Not what you expected.
No, I wasn't. Not when I walked in. And it was cold.
Okay.
And we were sat in this room, and I sat down, and I spoke to I spoke to a guy who plays in a band called Skin Dread, who's got his own.
Was it Benji?
No, it's Mikey Demas.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he has his own pedal line, Red Beard pedals.
Oh, yes, yep.
So I had a chat with him, which was great. I had a chat with a guy called Rob Chapman, who is a big YouTube personality, but has their own. Chapman Guitars is his brand.
Yes. Yeah.
So I had a chat with Rob and a guy that plays in Rob's band. So Rob's band called Dorje, and a guy who played in his band called Rabia, who's another huge YouTube sort of influencer.
So how long were you talking to each person at a time?
Get the table.
That's right.
We did, most of them were sort of anything between 20 minutes and half an hour.
Yeah.
And the idea being that we capture the content, and then we will then look at this. Jason and I are probably going to sit down, and we're probably going to top and tail it. So we'll probably do an intro, and then at the end we might talk a little bit about what came out in the interview.
So we just put it out per interview, an episode per person.
Some of them might be a couple together. Some of them might be individual, depending on how they fall. And
because there is no ideal length of a podcast.
There's no ideal length of a podcast.
That was a myth for a while.
Well, saying that though, I mean, I specifically mine I try and keep under 25 minutes just for voice fatigue of a single voice.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say.
Why?
The initial thing that people had was about commuters. The average commute is 20 minutes or 25 minutes.
No,
but if a podcast's really good, they'll just listen to the rest of it on the way home. Or they'll just carry it on the next day.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't buy into that because actually I prefer podcasts of an hour plus.
And I think in the top 20 podcasts in the world, over half of them are over an hour long.
Yeah, no, I don't buy into it. The reason why I did mine that way was because it was single voice. So
well, I mean,
it was monologue.
Short ones at work as well. Yeah, whatever works for you.
Well, I was just concerned that people. It comes from. I remember that's why they changed football commentators. So if you listen to 5 Live and they do a football commentary, they change the commentator halfway through.
Yeah, do they still do that?
They still do that on the bigger games when when they've got.
I do remember that, but I can't remember.
That was voice fatigue. So you get fatigue on
because they don't do it on the TV.
No, but there's always 2 commentators.
That's true. Yeah, but to be fair, there's sometimes there is 2 on the
yes,
on audio now.
Well, yeah, and there's.
But yeah, I do remember that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I kind of got it.
But
from
I can't think I would get bored of someone if it was just one person. Not if I suppose if they were good, then you wouldn't.
Do you know what? There's a really good point there because actually, if it's shit, you're going to turn off in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it probably doesn't.
Or you would just
matter.
Turn the sound. To be fair, I can't stand Chris Waddle.
Well, no.
Even though he's a Geordie and I'm a Geordie, his voice just annoys me. So sometimes he can't say the word penalty. He says pellanty. Oh, it does my head in. So I've actually turned if he's on the TV, I've turned the sound off and put the radio on.
Yeah,
and synced it up.
Yeah, no, I can get that. The thing is about that as well. If you've got a face like Chris Waddle and hair like Chris Waddle, you would have thought his voice would have been the bit you actually could have dealt with. But maybe...
No, never noticed that, but yeah, that's a fair point.
So I did that. I think the other thing about that, particularly on mine, is when I'm recording mine, I get to about 20 minutes, I'm like, I'm getting bored now.
It depends. I would for what you do. I would never shorten it just for the time's sake.
No,
if you had a lot to say, I would just do it.
It tends to fall that. It's funny because I did most of my segments. So the way mine's set up, I do a little 3 or 5 minute segment for each day of the week, Monday through Friday, and
Tuesday.
Yes, yeah. I quite like that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And they weren't specifically meant to be between 3 or 5 minutes. It just happens to be how long. When I do them, it just happens to be. And I think for the first time a couple of weeks ago, I did one that ran for about 10 minutes. Right. Which was a particular topic that I'd got particularly that I really
had a lot to say on.
I had a lot to say on, and I just let that one. I
think you should always do that.
Which worked out.
Don't think about time, just do it, and then worry about that later.
No, which is what I did. So anyway, back to Jason. So back to the guitar show. We went and recorded that. We're going to start doing that one, and that's great because he's got an audience.
Has he decided what it's going to be? Yes?
No, we're not even that far yet.
Okay,
so the show was last weekend. I've started listening to the to the audio we collected.
Is the audio pretty good?
The audio sounds fairly good to say. It was recorded in a cloakroom stroke cat toilet. It's actually really not bad at all.
And you can do things to it.
You can mess about with it to make it. And I think I'm a big fan of when I'm recording out and about, I'm a big fan of using dynamic mics.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to reduce the amount of room noise you're going to get.
Anything you can do to reduce the room noise
is so that worked out fine. And then we spoke to him, and then I spoke to Rabir, spoke to Rob Chapman, spoke to the guy from Red Beard Pedals, spoke to a guy called Mike Exeter, who has for a long time produced Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and UB40. Seems a bit of a weird mix, but it's a Birmingham thing. I just think it's you know. And then the guy that closed the show for them was a guy called Phil X, who's he has a band which is currently touring called The Drills, but he's also the touring guitarist for Bon Jovi.
Right.
So we had a long chat with Phil, and what we're trying to do is get to. We don't want to do guitar geekery because there's so much stuff with guitar geekery. So there's no point sitting down and saying, right, well, talk me through your rig, because there are plenty of ways, places you can go for that.
Absolutely.
What we're trying to do is get to a little bit more to
the person.
Yeah. So if it's a manufacturer or something like that, what's driving you to do what you do? And what are the values that sit behind what you do? And if it's an artist or if it's somebody like Rob Chapman, okay, well, what's got you to here?
That's kind of what we're doing here as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I started just the music industry because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
But as it's progressed, I just talk to anybody, because I started getting offers from people who are completely outside of my wheelhouse. Yeah. Authors, radio personalities, motivational speakers, all sorts. And if I look them up and I like them, then why not?
It's what you do.
Why limit myself to one thing?
No, you shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't. You absolutely and a great story is a great story.
Exactly.
I recorded a couple of signal paths for Shure, and one of them was trying not to make this all about Marillion, but one of them was with Marillion's lead singer, a guy called Steve Hogarth, and that was because if you go back in the annals of history, Marillion kind of invented crowdfunding.
Right.
So they were doing crowdfunding at the turn of the century.
Digitally.
No, well, kind of. It was kind of on forums and message boards originally, and the initial supporting stuff was actually postal based. So if you go back far enough, it was that we weren't even.
They were doing that to fund an album or something.
They did it to fund they did it to fund a tour first. So they had a North American tour.
Back then, the tour was the album.
Well, they couldn't tour in America. Right. Because at that point, if you could play New York and you could play Boston or Washington and you could play
where are they from?
Marillion or Aylesbury.
Right. Okay.
So and you can play the other coast, but you can't really play anything in the middle because it's just too difficult to make any kind of money doing it.
It's a crowded market.
So they had a hardcore of fans. So the fans funded the tour. Marc Kelly, who was a keyboard player, had been on a forum, on a message. Sorry, it wasn't even a forum. It was a message board. He was been on a message
is
board
going back
in the day.
Have you been on message boards?
I can't imagine what one is.
You've got no idea what he's got. No idea. No idea.
I didn't. I think he was going to say that.
What's the difference between that and a forum?
Well, when you went on a message board, there was no such thing as a forum.
Right.
So you're going back to very early days where it wasn't even websites. Websites weren't established in quite the same way.
Yeah,
it was
true, yeah.
it was real kind of computer geekery to actually
be able to get on there
to be able to get on there in the first place. So nothing was like it is now.
Before my time.
But yes, it's yeah. So and I wouldn't know how to do it. But anyway, so he was chatting with some fans in the US on a message board and worked out there was enough support for them to tour. How did they galvanise it? So they had a tour fund and they produced an album which they sold as part of this thing, and there was a pledge amount and everybody pledged more, and they ended up doing this tour, and then they came back and it was like, well, can we do this to fund an album? And they did it to fund an album, which ultimately then broke them away from the record company because they didn't sign a deal with a record company. They just signed a distribution deal.
Yeah.
So they went independent, and at the same time, they got a rehearsal studio, which they turned into a recording studio. And this is around 2000, and nobody's doing it back then.
No.
So
most people didn't even realise the bottom was about to fall off.
No. It was very much old model at that point in time. So I sat down with Steve for sure, and Steve told this story, which he does beautifully. I mean, he just 35 to 40 minutes. It's absolutely superb.
I am subscribed to that podcast. Actually,
that one is absolutely fantastic.
Signal Path.
And then I did another one which never actually saw the light of day. With Conor McNamara,
from
Five Live, who's been a big exponent of social media in what he does. So he's streamed a lot of the stuff he's done, and he got into what you could do with a mobile phone very early on. So I met Connor through the Mojo community, the mobile journalism community, and he's been right at the forefront of that, and did some work with Shure on a couple of the products that Shure brought out with the mics for Apple, for iPhones. And that one never saw the light of day, but that was
why
great.
not?
Because it was just all around the time when I was moving away from Shure, and then I don't think it ever then got put out.
Do you not get it and put it out yourself?
By Shure. Well, it's an interesting thing because I've still got the recordings, but technically I suppose it's Shure. So at some point
You could ask them.
Well, I might do that. I might either prod somebody in
worth
Shure,
it.
or I might actually put it out, because it was a really interesting conversation, and he's a fascinating character, and he tells a wonderful story. He was at University of Manchester, lives in Manchester still, and he RTE, which was his broadcaster in Ireland, wanted somebody as a football commentator, and RTE had never somebody had got rights to football, and in Ireland nobody had rights to football because it wasn't big over there.
To Irish football?
No, just to English football.
Oh,
so
right,
they didn't have the rights to English football because it was all Gaelic and what have you over there. So they didn't bother with it, and RTE managed to get the rights to broadcast the cup final, the FA Cup final, and so in a heartbeat they needed a commentator. And they hadn't got one, so they advertised for a commentator, and he sent a tape in, and got asked if he could do this. And Connor's got a really deep voice, so when you meet him, he looks like he's about 15. I mean, he's a lot older than that, but he's a pretty fresh face and what.
It's
have
funny
you.
when you see someone after you've heard them.
Yeah,
doesn't always match up.
Doesn't
like,
match. He doesn't match.
I don't know why audio suggest how they look. We should look, but
he doesn't match his voice.
No.
And in the nicest possible way, he doesn't match his voice. So he gets this gig. So he's still at university, or just out of university sort of time, yet sounds like he's really quite experienced. So I think he was very experienced. And he got asked if he'd do the cup final. He'd never done.
Was this a long time ago?
A long time ago, yeah.
Okay.
And he'd never done a cup final before. And I can't remember the year, and I can't remember who was playing. and it's on the podcast, but I can't remember who it was. But he gets given some cash by RTE to go down and commentate, and gets his accreditations to go and commentate on the cup final, having never commentated on a live game ever.
Wow.
So he appears.
But when he sent his tape in, he must have been practicing doing that, was he?
Yeah, but he's not actually done it. He's not done it for real.
Wow.
So he's done all his prep and what have you. But he's like, I'm an absolute bag of nerves. Turns out, and I can't remember the game it was. I think Chelsea were playing, whoever it was. There's a goal after 45 seconds, and as soon as that happens, he's just in the moment. And because
that's probably the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah, because if it'd been 60 minutes of drabness,
you get time to think or probably overthink things.
He'd got no stories. He'd got nothing to fill air with, and the game just absolutely proved to be a classic. And has gone on from there. And he's an incredible commentator. And I love listening to him.
Yeah.
So that was another. That was just another one, which was just a great story.
Yeah.
He's just
people love stories.
If you get right people in the
going back to podcasting, actually.
Yes.
I think a lot of podcast producers don't realise that most people don't they're not. We're recording now in absolute silence with headphones on. Yeah. Most people aren't listening like that.
No.
Whether they're out with a dog, running, walking in the car, which all already has a certain amount of noise.
Yeah.
So I'm always conscious that you need to make sure the voice is clear, even if there's background noise. Do your best to minimise it, because some podcasts that I listen to, they're good, but if it's someone calling on the phone, the other person's on the phone and it's not. And I have to turn up really loud, and that causes other problems. If I have to ride the volume knob, then I'll listen to it when I get home. Do you know what I mean?
People don't fundamentally understand microphones. So if the number of times I've had people say to me about boardrooms, can we not have the microphones in the ceiling? And it's like, okay, fine, I kind of get what you're saying, but would you stick your mobile phone onto the ceiling to make a fake call?
Yeah,
and the answer is no. And if you just say that to somebody and say, look, you put your mobile phone on the other side of the table, put it on loudspeaker, and you have a conversation, and you ask the person at the other end what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And
podcasters do that. They buy those blue Yeti, and they put it in the middle of the
Yeah,
table,
yeah,
and there's like
yeah.
five
Four
of them,
right?
and
Yeah.
you can't hear any of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
talking over each other. There's loads of echo, and
Aside from the fact that you shouldn't. You can do whatever you like, but I can't understand how you get more than 4 people on a podcast because
you shouldn't.
I lose
It's
track of
it's a car crash.
who's
It's
talking.
horrific. The only time I've seen that work, I've said this before, is like there's an actors. I don't know if it's a podcast, but it's definitely on YouTube where they get certain famous actors around
Yeah.
a table, and then sometimes there's like 8 of them, but they're so good at talking that no one talks. No, not a single person. Sometimes when they laugh, they'll laugh over each other, but they never. You just wait till someone's finished, then someone else takes over.
Fair play. If you put
But most people don't
if you
do
put
that.
Michael Caine, if you put the most imitated voices of all time in a room, you're
That's the
probably
only example
fine.
I've got.
But it's the only one you can.
So that
probably
kind of
do.
says the point, doesn't it?
Yeah. You probably. can't do
I
it.
think what's the most we've had on here? Like 3, maybe 4 guests,
4. Yeah, we've had 3 guests before.
and it wasn't too bad. But genuinely, we don't do that because it's just
No, I think 4's about. the
Maximum.
max, and I think 4 of one gender is probably quite difficult as well. I
And
think.
understanding the mic, what you're saying, we get it because you get people who are have nothing to do with microphones. They'll start drifting away like
Yeah.
this, and stuff, which is part of the reason why you have
Yeah,
headphones.
yeah.
Because then you realise
absolutely.
your
You
voice
realise
is
why you're
gone.
doing it. Yeah.
I've had people going, "Why do we need headphones?" And then as soon as we start, they go, "Oh yeah."
Even if you do it all the time, you still do it. You
Yeah.
still get excited. You can't help yourself
Yeah.
drift off mic. So
And the things like getting used to turning your head when you cough or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
sneeze, or if you laugh,
Yeah.
if you laugh and you don't want to do it too loud in the microphone.
yeah, no, it's which actually gigging and singing helps for.
yeah. Definitely.
If you've done any of that, and I only did backing vocals, but I did do some singing. And that does help a little bit. with
Yeah, I did a lot
bit
of that.
yeah.
But yeah, no, people. It is. You have to sort of train people to. Some people are like all over the line like that,
Yeah,
and other people
yeah.
are like too far away.
Yeah.
There's a certain sweet spot. But like you say, all mics are different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So where were we? What were we?
About you doing your own podcast.
Yes. So anyway, so Guitar Show 1, and that's going to come out, and we're going to see what's working with that. And there's 2 or 3 others that are,
Sounds like a good idea.
are floating around, but most of them kind of more corporate, as in working with people whom. So like I'm currently having conversations with an accountant friend because they want to do something, and I didn't expect. That's what I didn't expect. But actually, the appetite for it is massive, and there's lots of business now starting to understand how it would work, just to reinforce and broaden their brand.
You can reach people in a way that you can't. There's no other way to reach it like this.
Well, I think the other thing is, if you're working with companies that have budget
And a brand.
then you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
Whereas if you set up to try and say, I'm going to help you with podcasts, and you look to people who are producing, for want of a better term, vanity podcasts.
Or just hobby podcasts.
Yeah. There's no budget. There's no money there.
They need to have a really good idea.
And
even then, there's no guarantee.
And even there's no guarantee. And I think as well, if you're doing it for yourself, you're probably far more likely to start to teach yourself how to do it.
Yeah.
I think if you're producing a podcast as an accountant because you've got 8 episodes you want to put out there, at no point in that journey do you think to yourself, I'd really like to learn how to edit. That would be really
You'll
great.
just get somebody else to do it.
Somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And I think I think for me that's the bit where I say I've been recording going back to tape 4 tracks for years and years and years, and you just pick up certain skills, and it's not that you get to be particularly an amazing editor, it's just you get quicker at it.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do
proficient,
if you're going to do a series of 8 podcasts, it's not worth learning how to edit because you need to do far more than that just to make it time efficient. So so that seems to work quite nicely. And then I found myself one of the things I loved in my role at Shure and prior to that was there's a fantastic music trade show that goes on in California in January called the NAMM Show.
Oh, NAMM, yeah.
And for a number of years, certainly for the last decade, I'd been every January to NAMM. And when people say to you, what is it that you like about a trade show in California in January? And then realise, they've answered their own question. So, but it was a place where it's particularly special, not because it was California, because California is one of those places that, to be honest, I go to, and I have a love-hate relationship with California.
Traffic for one.
Well, yeah, and just the
crazy.
plastic nature of the place.
Oh,
and
it's
what have
fake.
you.
There's a lot of fakeness.
But then the other thing, the thing that it was when you're with colleagues and you're with friends in there, it's completely disconnected from the UK in terms of time. So there's about an hour in the morning where you can speak to anybody back home. So at the time you're getting up, you've got about an hour of talk time with people in the UK. So you'd wake up to a day's worth of email. You'd sit and do your email 7:30 in the morning, earlier if you're jet lagged. If you needed a conversation or two, you'd have them then. And then basically there's a cut-off where your email stops because everybody back home.
They're all in bed.
All in bed,
yep.
or gone home. And the phone's not ringing. So suddenly you're with a group of people that are literally the movers and the shakers for sort of the MI retail industry. And they're not checking their phones. They're not distracted. They're absolutely in the moment. And that doesn't happen over here. If you sit down for a meeting with somebody, the most you'll get is an hour before something bursts through.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen when you're over there. So it's an amazing experience, apart from the fact it's warm and there's all the novelty of it, is also the fact that you're actually getting quality time with people. So I used to really, really adore this show.
When you went in the past, was that in a work capacity?
Work capacity, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
but did you get to enjoy it much as a punter, or do you always have something to do?
The first couple of years you go, you are just absolutely beside yourself. So the spare days, you are in there and you're looking at every hall, and I'm looking.
Is it a week?
It's 4 days.
days.
It's 4 days.
Oh, okay.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so you end up going in on the Saturday afternoon, on the Sunday, and you're looking at every guitar pedal, and you're looking at every guitar, and you are just trawling the halls, and you're trying to see anybody famous. And absolutely. Because the Yanks do that shit really well.
Yeah, of course.
They do it really well. And bearing in mind, it's in Anaheim, and next door is Disney. It has a whole different level of kind of specialness, because a bit of Disney, dust is sprinkled all over it. When you've been for 8 to 10 years, you get a bit of NAMM fatigue, and then that's when you start watching the people who are clearly there for the first time, because they're like,
that used to be me.
That was me. So you tend to explore the area a bit more when you've been for quite a few years. But so this year, I finished with Shure in August, and in my head, I knew that I was going to struggle NAMM week. Even in August, I knew I was going to struggle.
If you weren't there?
If I wasn't there.
Right, okay.
And because I was just so used to getting on that plane with people that, after 20 years in the industry, 15 years with Shure, had just become friends. So anybody who I might have messaged or spoken to that week was going to be disconnected. So the disconnection was now working the other way round. That people weren't going to be answering WhatsApp or answering messages or what have you. And then, of course, when they went on social media, they did the same infuriating shit that I did every year, which was
post about it,
post pictures of palm trees, and as you do, or videos of me on first time I went on a electric scooter, actually, last year on a like line that was fun. Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic. 15 kilometres an hour those things go. They're brilliant.
Yeah, they're fast.
So I knew that was going to happen as well. And I sat down on the Monday of that, what would have been that week. So the Monday I would have. So
you definitely decided that you weren't going. You'd already.
I couldn't see any.
Would it have been interesting to go completely as a punter and no work?
I did think about it, but at that point in time, I hadn't really made the decision, or even made any kind of decision about whether I was going to remain in the industry or not. And it just felt like I don't need to do. I need a clearer idea in my head of what I want to do if I'm gonna spend the however many, it'd be a couple of grand to do that trip. And to be honest, I didn't want to. When you're over there and you're working, it sounds. I always try to justify this to people when I went, but you did work from 8 a.m. till whatever at night. You were having breakfast meetings and what have you, and I didn't want to feel like that guy who was out there, kind of. Sort of saying, "Oh, if you've got 5 minutes, we'll have a coffee," for people who I knew who were booked up.
Because you've been in that situation.
Because I've been in that situation, and I know. I
can just imagine you sat across, just looking at the Shure booth.
Exactly.
Sure.
And I thought, no, well, I've no definite reason to be there, and as much as I'm going to miss it, it's not something.
Maybe go down the line, go back.
There's a very good chance it'll happen again in the future. So I was sat on the Monday, the day I would have flown. And I was thinking, and loads of thoughts were going through my head about my feelings about the NAMM show and about my feelings about everything that had happened in the past year or so and all the things that had been going on. And I thought, why don't I just say this out loud? So I set a microphone up, and I just I scrolled down a few things that I'd been thinking over the past few days, and I just spoke them out loud. and I sent the tapes. I sent the recordings.
I still say that sometimes.
To a friend to listen to. In fact, it was Deborah, the lady that does the On Brand With podcast. And she listened to them and she sort of said, "Wow, that's honest. Are you, it's quite raw. Is that?" And I said, "Well, yeah."
Are you sure you want people to hear that?
Are you sure you want people to hear it? And I said, "Well, yes, because it's what I'm thinking." And it was the premise of, I want to do this even if nobody listens, because actually this is good for me. It is good for my mental health. If nothing, it's good for you. It's good for my mental health. It helps me, quantify things, and it helps me just get my head kind of.
There is something
position
to be said for actually saying things out loud that you maybe think.
Well, the crazy thing was, I say on the podcast that were going around my head, I was actually saying them out loud at home on my own. But trying not to share.
That's a sign that you need a podcast.
That's a sign that you need a podcast. You're actually saying out loud. So I did that, and then I did a couple things, sent them away, came back fine, and I thought, well, okay, there's maybe something here. And then I started trying to think about a format. And in my own head, what I decided was I wanted to do every bit of it myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what would the alternative be?
Well, by this I mean I'd been playing around with a guitar riff.
Right.
So I thought, and I got this little guitar riff, and I thought, well, that'd actually make quite a neat little thing for a podcast. So I recorded the guitar riff, and while I was doing that, I was noodling. And I thought, well, actually, the noodles might work on the podcast for little bits of incidental breaks. So I recorded all the music instead of going out and getting something royalty free or what have you. I thought I would do that. And then the artwork, which is shocking, but
it needs work. I was going to say it needs work.
Absolutely shocking.
You need a new logo.
Yeah, no, absolutely shocking. No, I get it. It's supposed to be very low-fi, so that's fine. But that was because it was just something that I knocked up in a very
you've got to have something to start.
Exactly. It's something I knocked up.
We've rebranded.
And the mugs are great. And I'm letting my coffee go cold. So I wanted to control the whole process from the beginning to the end.
I think that's quite important, especially from the beginning.
And in terms of every bit, in terms of, I still don't use Facebook. The only reason I'm using Facebook is just because there are people on Facebook that I'm connected to that I'm not connected to on any other platform.
Yeah.
Because Facebook predates everything, and I kind of moved away from Facebook 6-8 years ago because I found it too intrusive a platform.
That's why I separated my personal profile. I just created a page.
Yeah.
So I just pointed everyone to that. I removed everyone who wasn't like friends or family. Yeah. I just said, I'm doing all my music and media stuff on here. And I just interact with that. And that worked. Rather than a one where I have to send you a friend request, sort of, a personal one. It works much better as a page.
And to be fair, that probably is where I will progress to. Yeah. I mean, the initial part of jumping.
And I have it linked to my Instagram, so if I put some Instagram, it goes straight to that page.
It links to both. Yeah. Well, the only reason for going back onto Facebook was just for no other reason than to talk to people that I'd no other ways of getting in touch with, just to see what would happen. So the whole thing has been me just understanding and starting, because I think the thing is
January. You put
the first one went out in about towards the end.
January,
I think it's only been running 6 weeks.
Yeah,
it's not been.
Does it take up much time then?
Do
you record it the days at the end of each day?
No, I do it all on a Friday.
Okay, right. Because if that was something I'd forget.
So what I do is everything is, apart from 1 or 2 instances, everything is true to the fact that the day I talk about it is the day it happened or the day I was thinking it.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of things that haven't. So I did talking to you a little bit before about a longer section. I did a long section that had been prompted by the Caroline Flack suicide.
Yeah.
And that I'd been thinking about that over a few days before but I picked the Monday for that particular one. But pretty much everything is true too, and everything is true. There's nothing on there that isn't. I mean, I did have 3 goes at putting a pair of socks on which had got left and right on them, and I did do that.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing on there that's made up. But what I do is I sit and record it on a Friday.
Okay. And now you put it out Saturday morning.
It goes out Saturday morning. Yeah. I record and edit it at the same time. Because it's in a template format and it's not.
And when it's 25 minutes, it's a lot easier to manage.
And because effectively I'm self-editing as I talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's where it becomes easier because, I mean, what I find is, so there's 5 sections, and there's now a spoken introduction. It was originally pre-recorded, but now it's spoken. So there's 6 sections in, and I might do 9 takes for the 6 goes.
Right.
And normally I know within about 30 seconds of starting that,
Yeah.
you know, you go da-da-da, oh, and then you start that again. So,
But the guitar riff that you play in each episode, that's
pre-recorded.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I just shoved a mic in front of the
Yeah,
amp.
no, it works. It works.
And the little bit of telephone effect on the voice, all that is
Yeah.
that's
No, I like that.
that's
I
just
like that.
that's just for speed. But the rest is so I will record a clip. And I'll check it, and I'll tweak it a little bit. So I'll top and tail it and normalize it, and then I'll drop it in, and then I do that as I go. So actually, when I finish recording, it's actually ready to go out.
That's good.
And then what I then do is I ping it to my wife, and she is the listen for, because you don't really like listening to your own voice.
You get used to it.
Get used to it, but it's still not a joy. So she listens to it before it's published, just for any daft anomaly where I've not edited incorrectly. I've dropped something in the wrong place. Something clashes with something else.
Or she goes, you maybe shouldn't have said that.
Or you maybe shouldn't have said that. Which actually she hasn't said so far. She hasn't said that so
Delete
far.
Friday.
yeah. She's not said that so far. So it's been fine. Which is funny actually. We were out for a meal last night with some friends we've both known for nearly 26, 27 years. And one of the Jenny and the couple that we were out with, she said to Al, how do you feel? How do you feel about Ant doing this? How do you feel about him? Because it is quite candid. How do you, And I was like, well, fine. If I think it's something that he believes in, and it it's certainly helpful and cathartic for him. So it is absolutely fine. And she was struggling with it more than Alison was, because I said, well, what's the problem? And Jenny was like, well, I've known you so many years, and yet I feel like I'm eavesdropping on something.
Yeah.
Because I know you anyway.
That's the attraction of it, I think. A lot of podcasts, it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
More personal.
Yeah. Well, and it should be a podcast is an eavesdrop on a private conversation to a certain extent.
But it's also unedited, longer.
Yeah.
Like which is what we like to do here, because you get past your pleasantries and you can talk about things. There's nothing off topic. If we go off topic, it doesn't matter. That's what we do here.
Here's a question then. Do you find it easier to record with people who have done at least some of this before, or does it not make any difference?
When you say this, what do you mean?
Well, just actually talking into microphones and not being...
Yeah, but usually I'll do my research on a guest, so I wouldn't book someone if they didn't.
They're not.
Like, I get loads of offers from managers and PR companies wanting their new young artists to come out. It's like, but what are they going to have to say? They're just that's not what I mean. I'm not in the music PR industry. Yeah. I want to talk to someone who's done something for a long time. Yeah, who's got a lot to say.
Yeah.
So I kind of make sure that doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen. Yeah, no, that's fair.
Occasionally, it's usually some people are a bit nervous, but I've got really good at reading them and guiding them. So it's usually just got to get past the first 10-15 minutes.
I was just happy to get out of the car. I was just literally happy to get out of the car.
But some people are really, and like we've producer tech as well, has got if you can pick up on that, you don't even tell them you've started. You just start talking.
It's funny because
and then they just
when I record with the ones that I've done, I tend to roll and just
that's way.
And then at some point go right. Okay, well. It's rolling.
Because for some people, if there was a big red light,
I know.
we're live. They go.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Yeah, it's a lot easier to roll in and just get rid of whatever you come out with, which is fine. But so my podcast, great. 6 weeks in.
Therapy for me.
Therapy for me, and it is just that, and it's.
But hopefully, I mean, you've only been going a few weeks, but it'll become therapy for other people. I'm sure things that you talk about, it's not as if you're not going through things that other people are going through or having the same thoughts.
Different people have quoted different bits back. It's not like you've said one thing that's resonated in 1 week and that's the only thing people have talked about. Yeah. Everybody who's coming back is quoting different bits of it of it back. The thing that's going to be interesting, and this is the bit I don't know, and as I say, I would still do it even if nobody was listening, because I've now got to the stage where it really
because it's for you anyway.
That hour on a Friday when I do it is now quite a special part of my week. So that's not gonna change. But I guess the bit we're going to find out is whether it resonates with people who don't actually have a clue who I am.
Yeah.
So the thing
over
at the
time,
moment
you'll find that. Yeah.
is the audience is largely people that at least somehow know who I am or have some experience of me in one of my guises.
I think one of the key things about podcasting is making content that people feel compelled to share. If you can crack that, then it's just going to grow organically.
And that's the bit, and that's what
without having to spend thousands on PR and Facebook adverts and Instagram adverts and all that.
Well,
which you can. That can help. It could help you reach people that you couldn't normally reach. But at the end of the day, if you've got good content, it will. You've just got to stick at it as well.
There's a huge pressure on going. There's a huge pressure if you go viral and you want to continue. If you want to just be famous for 15 minutes, then there are things that will happen and ways and means where you can go. Probably shouldn't
it's the whole like Love Island sort of all that.
We probably shouldn't talk about going viral either, should we? At the moment, we need a new phrase for it. But so that can be done. But the problem with doing that is that if tomorrow, for whatever reason, somebody listened to my podcast and then who'd got a huge audience and put it out, and suddenly I got a gazillion downloads. What's going to happen then? Because you're going to struggle
you've got to be
keep
ready
that
for it.
audience past a few weeks, because you could have just been the novelty.
Yeah.
For the for
You've
that.
also got to be ready for something like
Of
that.
course you
which
have.
is
Of
why
course you
doing it steadily, organically, is the best way. It's like a
Absolutely.
band.
Yeah.
It's much better for them to do it album by album, get a bit bigger, rather than have one album. The first album, just then you'll.
How many bands do we talk about that never better their first album?
A lot.
A hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And that can, Oasis, discuss.
First two albums.
First
say.
two. Yeah, all right, I get it. But so it's now waiting to see if it will go past. If it will go.
You've just got to be
that.
consistent. You just got to. If you're enjoying doing it, then just keep doing it.
Exactly. I'm loving doing it.
I mean, I don't know if you spoke to people who are like, I want to do a podcast. I want to do this and all that, but they don't really have an idea of what they want to do.
They just want to do a podcast.
Yeah, they've heard this thing. But they don't have an idea.
I had it not. So it did come together in a few days. Literally everything, the music, the format, everything came together in a very the lo-fi logo all came together in a very short space of time.
Really, it didn't take you hours to come.
No. Funny enough, it didn't take me hours at all. It took me a bloody long time to get the right size, so the hosting platform would take it. But that's
iTunes as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I use Captivate, and I think if it gets through Captivate, it'll get onto.
It'll use the same parameters.
But
do you listen to the feed, Libsyn's podcast?
No,
by any chance. They have these section where they have emails but they're about podcasting on Libsyn. They always have the worst email of the week, and there was one not long ago about some guy emailed them about his artwork wasn't showing in iTunes, or it was getting an error message because the artwork was right size, and he said it's got to be, I think it's 1400 by 1400 at an absolute minimum.
Yes. And
so he got a reply, and he said they re-put it up, and it was 1400 by 1399, and the guy went. And the guy, no, it has to be 1400 by 1400. And the guy went, it's close enough. He's like, fine. Don't be in there then. It's just have people.
That error message.
Yeah.
Which could be the greatest artwork ever, but anyway.
Yeah.
So it came together in that moment, and that was the point where I kind of thought, yes, I'm happy to put this out, because it felt right. The whole journey felt
you don't
right.
want to things like that. You don't want to think about it too long, otherwise you won't do it.
No. And it just, as soon as I started talking into the mic, and I thought, no, this sounds like me. Yeah,
which is what you wanted,
and that's exactly
what
I
how
wanted.
it's got to be. I mean, I've helped similar situation. I've helped 3 or 4 friends start podcasts now, and a lot of my advice is, other than if you've got a good idea, they'll ask me, "What about this? What about that?" Just start the damn thing. You can't improve what you don't start.
No, you can't.
So just start.
No,
and
that's
good advice.
The only thing I'm thinking that I might do, and I'm toying with at the moment, is I might, as we go on a bit further, I might say, if somebody wants to do one week, then I might step aside for a week and say, if you want to do a week, then I might. On my format.
As if they do Monday, Tuesday, Friday.
Do exactly the same
in their
format,
life instead
in
of
their
yours.
life instead of mine.
Well, that's an interesting
So I
idea.
might sort of say, right, okay, if anybody, I might sort of say, right, once a month, I'll open and say, right, so if you want to do it,
that's a good idea.
I just need you just send me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I could even send you a mic or something to record it. So because funnily enough, I've got a few mics. I've got another couple of mics, and I've got a few little Shure do 2 brilliant USB microphones and iPhone microphones.
These are as well.
And just because they're iOS and because there's a little recording app that Shure have that records to WAV, I can literally just send somebody this thing and say, plug it in, download the app, hit record, and chances are it will be fine.
Yeah.
Go somewhere relatively quiet, it will be fine. And all I need is your 5 little segments of audio.
No, that would be a good idea. Because if they're sending them to you and you listen, you go, that's interesting.
Yeah.
They might say something really interesting.
I think because there's that whole eavesdropping thing, I think if somebody talks about 5 days in their life, you know...
I'll maybe do like one a month.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe to open it up.
Because you don't want to interrupt your flow too often.
But I could quite happily miss a week or produce it as an extra, whatever.
Yeah, you could do that.
Or even put the week that you're missing from me on Patreon. That might work.
You do Patreon? Patreon?
I don't know if it's Patreon or Patreon. I've set up a page, and so far I have had fuck all interest.
No, well, this is the thing. It's usually wait till you've got a bit of a following first before you do that.
Yeah. Well, I did it anyway because it was all part of understanding. So it was to me, it was more a case of how do you actually do it? How do you set the page up? How do you do X, Y, and Z?
I mean, you can just say, if you like my podcast, give me a couple of pounds a month.
Send me some cash.
Yeah, but another option is if you do that, you'll get X, like bands do on their pledge things. If they pay towards it, they get exclusive content.
And that's the bit that ultimately I would probably probably do.
When you know you've got a bit of a following, that definitely thing to dive into.
As I say, it was more the case of if I'm going to maybe... So this is one that, for argument's sake, if the Guitar Show one takes off, that could get to that very quickly.
Definitely, because it's already got a following.
Let's face it, that's the model. That has to be part of the model.
Course.
So if I've actually at least gone through it and had some interaction with the platform, at least I'm not surprised when I first start to talk
you've done right.
So, but it's not that mine's generating any interest at the moment. Maybe because it's people I know who will turn around. I'm not giving you any money.
Yeah, when it grows.
At
least it's already set up there, ready to go. If someone does,
you've already told people you got loads of mics. It only takes you an hour. Why am I paying you? You've got to be joking. I've probably just killed that now for my podcast completely. But so I mean,
some people do make a living out of doing that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had, what do you need? Probably, if you had 500 subscribers paying £2 a month, there's £1,000 a month.
Yeah, which pretty much the $3 tier appears to be the kind of the entry level tier for a bit of extra content and what have you.
People will do that if they like something and they want it to keep happening. They'll contribute.
Do you know what? I've started doing it, so I now do it. I never thought I would. I mean, I couldn't be more of a Yorkshireman, particularly because I wasn't born in Yorkshire. So I was born in North Nottinghamshire and always wanted to be born in Yorkshire. And if there was a reason I was never going to speak to my parents again, that would probably be the one. Though we seem to have moved through it. They keep reminding me they brought me up, so that seems to be the quid pro quo there. But the biggest regret of my life is not the fact I wasn't born in Yorkshire, mainly because when I was born, you needed to have been born in Yorkshire to play for Yorkshire Cricket Club.
Right, I knew there was going to be a sport.
And then there was. So I grew up knowing that I was never going to play cricket for Yorkshire Cricket Club, and in my head that was because I wasn't born in Yorkshire and had nothing to do with
talent.
The fact I couldn't actually bat ball or catch a ball.
Right. Okay.
So I was born achingly close to the border. And my dad's from Sheffield. And I spent a lot of my early life in Sheffield at my dad's parents and became a Sheffield United supporter and all those kind of things. So Sheffield's my spiritual home. And Sheffield's one of those places that... you're from the northeast. Are you from Newcastle? Yeah. And Newcastle and Sheffield are really similar. I lived up in Newcastle for 3 years. It's one of those places that you are incredibly proud of coming from, particularly because... How old are you?
39.
Right. So you'll remember the Thatcher years. You'll have some memory of the back end of the Thatcher years. You will understand.
I remember lots of people being very angry.
Yes, a lot of people very angry. But you'll also know how hard it was in the northeast in the late 80s and the early 90s. And I was in the northeast around about that time. Sheffield was exactly the same. Liverpool exactly the same, Glasgow exactly the same. And the people from all four of those cities, which for me are the four northern cities, and I'm going to piss off the people from Manchester and Leeds and Edinburgh, but for me the four big northern cities are those. And I think the sense of community in those places is incredible.
Yeah.
So when if you feel like you're from Sheffield or from Newcastle, that is something you wear around wherever you go. And so I couldn't be more of a proud Yorkshireman and a proud sort of Sheffield dweller, even though I wasn't born there, because that's the place that's touched me.
Yeah.
So how do we get onto that?
I can't remember.
How the hell did we get onto Yorkshire from there? I haven't got a clue. Where was anyway? So
we're talking about your podcast, our Patreon, and then patreon.com.
Yeah, patreon.com. I've lost it after that. I don't know how we got there.
It's fine.
I don't remember.
About giving exclusive content.
No, it wasn't that. I know what it was. It was because I've just subscribed to two things, and I would be a proud Yorkshireman who would be like, I'm not paying for that.
Oh, yes.
I'm not paying for that. And now what I've started doing is I've started paying money for content I like. And because the penny dropped in my head. The penny dropped as, well, I pay for Netflix and I pay for Spotify and I pay for... So why wouldn't I pay an individual for content that I get something from?
So are you just contributing to them, their general costs, or are you getting exclusive content for...
I'm getting exclusive content for those things. Yeah. So one of them is the Romaniacs podcast. So my degree's in politics, and I'm not Jeremy Corbyn left of centre, but I'm definitely red rather than blue. And I think Brexit's a ridiculous act of self-harm. I can't understand how we've got ourselves here. So I became very politically engaged again.
Were you going to get into politics?
There's been moments when I've thought about it.
Is that why you studied it, though?
No, I studied it because I wanted to do a modern history degree. And politics is actually a really good modern history degree. Because I liked political history. I didn't really like social history too much. Right. I wasn't a kind of a Corn Laws and what was the shape of the village in 1427.
Yeah.
I'm really not interested in that at all. But I was very interested in the political side of it. And I like modern history. And a politics degree is largely a 20th century history degree with a little bit of political theory thrown in.
So you're another one who's... I spoke to many people who studied something and then ended up doing nothing to do with that.
No, because I found retail. And
But I always find that... I always found it like people dedicate that much time of their life to something and then they just never... It seems to happen a lot.
I think it happens more with art students than it does with science students.
Okay.
But I've got nothing to back that up, so I'm going full on Trumpian here and saying I've got no way to back it up. I just think it, and it's fine.
It is difficult at that age to know what you want to do with your life, isn't it?
Difficult.
To make those kind of choices at 18, 19.
I think the one thing that was nailed was that I was an art student. So the way I apply myself, the jobs that I've done, the way I think, the way I like to try and solve problems, and the way I like to think around solutions, is definitely the person who spent his formative educational years writing essays and weighing up pros and cons and putting forward arguments. So I think there's an element of that came from being an art student, and I can see why so many art students could end up being lawyers or could end up being all manner of different things, or politicians, to be fair. Because I think it teaches you a different way of looking at the world. And I know if you're a scientist, you get data and you prove things out and what have you. But there's a more empathetic argument if you're an art student. You tend to think about how these things affect people, and you tend to take that route as well.
Just creative people in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because it's, and I don't know how you feel about this. There's kind of a. And again, no way to back up this. I'm going to say something that I have absolutely no way of substantiating whatsoever. But I do think there's a bit of 5, 10, 15% of the population are creative and want to be creative. And then there's 80, 85% of the population who don't feel they can be creative but want to consume things from creative people or somehow in awe of it.
There's definitely a correlation.
Because, to me, it's... the most obvious thing in the world to set a microphone up or do something, or to pick a guitar up or do something. And yet you'll sit and you'll be noodling around on the guitar, and you'll get people who are just in awe of the fact that you can do that thing. And then you'll then look at that person and go, well, hang on a minute, you're a biologist or you're an X, Y, and Z. You've got incredible skills, but they're somehow in awe of that creativity.
It is, yeah. It is.
So
some people they just can do something,
yes.
but they love something else, but they can't do it.
Yeah.
But they'll happily watch someone else do it.
I'm happy to stand on a stage. As long as I've got a story to tell. I'm happy to stand on a stage. So I'll present to 100, 500,000, 5,000 people. That doesn't bother me as long as I've got a story to relate. Yeah. Then I'm fine doing that, and then you get a load of other people who are really high functioning, academically, and really high functioning in terms of their work life. But then I can't stand on a stage. I can't talk to my
yeah. It's like there's a barrier.
Yeah.
But I think creative people in general are people who think about things, ask questions, and think outside the box.
Yeah.
A lot. Some people don't do that, or some people maybe used to, but then they get a career and they or like people who have to give up music careers or whatever because they got a job. Or they got married, or they had a kid. That's still in them.
Let's face it, because they needed cash.
Well, yeah, but that's still in them. That creative.
No, it never goes away.
No, but it just kind of gets subdued because of life.
And then it's finding the outlet.
Maybe those are the people who then listen to other people who have, because they haven't got time to do it, but they can listen.
They can listen to it, but they do,
which is podcasting.
But they are in awe of it. Yeah. And I think, and podcasting. What I love about this format is, for me, every other corner of social media now is just about shouting. Yeah. So it's just
showing
about disruption,
perception.
And YouTube content is just about something that is going to be big and brash, and he's gonna either shock or is gonna stop somebody in the tracks, because that's all we've got left. Yeah. On every other platform. The
YouTube, especially the younger ones. Have you noticed the way they edit their videos?
No.
There's no. They cut out all the gaps, any thoughts, any pauses. It goes from one thing straight to the next.
Which I never do I
don't like it.
I'm happy to leave a pause in.
Different generation. I don't know, but this is why I prefer this. I like some people even edit podcasts. They edit out. They spend hours editing all the ums and the ahs and the pauses and any noise anomalies that come up. I was like, no, we don't do any.
No,
you should have two people who can have a good conversation. Then just record it.
If I said "lol," I would expect you to. I'd expect you to take that out, because that's just inappropriate.
If you were seriously putting in conversation, yeah.
But apart from that, I think you're
trying too hard.
Trying far too hard. But no. What there's a thing, isn't there, that intros to songs have disappeared?
Yeah.
Song intros. It used to be that a song, "Sweet Child of Mine," however long it is before we actually get to a vocal, like about 9 hours or something.
But yeah, you talk about mainstream music, pop music. Yeah, it's a whole.
It's gone.
It's a different ballgame.
It's gone. But even in rock music, it's gone.
Well, the DJs used to talk over the intros.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
We've got 9 seconds before it comes in.
But there was it was on something, and they did this study, and it was they've gone now. It's like 10, 15 seconds. That's all you get.
In pop music,
straight
because
in.
It's the average song's like 3 minutes. Yeah.
But the average song was always 3 minutes, but we still. Well, I suppose it wasn't. I suppose we
sometimes it was like up to
8,
4.
7 days,
We'd have a lot more.
A lot more.
You'd get a lot more credit to, and you would play songs that were longer.
What I don't get, and I'm really going to sound old here. What I don't get is my youngest son watches somebody called Zebra Gamer. Straight away, it's Zebra, but we'll leave that alone.
Okay, because he's American.
Yeah. And he's and so
is this on like Twitch, like a gamer who streams?
It's a gamer, yeah, and it's the kids' game, so it's Mario and the Lego games and what have you. My son's 7. It's now so he doesn't watch it on YouTube. He watches it on Amazon Prime.
Right.
So it's actually streamed as part of Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay.
Even though he can watch it on YouTube as well, but Amazon Prime have picked it up, and he sits and watches this guy play a game for hours.
Does he play the game himself? Has he got the game?
He's got the game, but he doesn't play it when he just sits and watches it. Watches somebody else playing a game.
I don't understand this whole. I don't have a problem with it.
No, but I don't get it.
It's just a phenomenon. It's just. Like, you couldn't have predicted that. People make thousands of pounds. People have live rich because they've got a streaming channel. And thousands of people watch them play.
But
and they, you can tip them. You can give them money as they play.
Yeah. But he's 7, and he's watching somebody.
For your
play
son
a
who's
video
7,
game.
that could be a career aspiration for him.
Well, the crazy thing is though, isn't it? Because my eldest son is 12, and for a while, all he wanted to be. What do you want to be? I want to be a YouTuber.
That's
As, you know,
that's unreal.
And it's like, well, how, what, who, how, what, and but and he, to be fair, my eldest son does it. He watches Footpack, this thing with cards for FIFA, and he sits and watches people
Open the
packs.
Well, to be fair, the precedent for that was
Unboxing, yeah,
which is, that's huge. I have done a few of those.
Right.
When if I've been getting something and I've watched before I've got it, I watch them open it and set it open, because they don't just open the box; they go through it and say this is this.
Yeah, but that's fine if you want to physically buy.
But I wouldn't
something.
I wouldn't watch someone open a box of something I had no intention of buying. Let's open these curling tongs.
So let's go back to when we were kids. So the Footpack is the equivalent of panini stickers.
Yeah, you physically open them.
So would you have videoed yourself opening a pack of panini stickers?
I wouldn't watch someone else do it either. Not unless they might have had a swaps, something that I might have wanted. But no, I couldn't have predicted that. But it's a different generation. We've just got to go with it.
Yeah. You just sigh when you walk past.
But yeah, it could be a career aspiration for your kids. But there will be a cut-off point though, because the longer that it's a thing, the more people are going to do it. It's going to be harder to make money with it.
Listen, I wouldn't mind so much if he was capable of putting his bowl and his spoon in the dishwasher when he's had his breakfast.
Yeah,
if he was capable of the other things, the other accepted.
He's only 7.
Norm.
Cut him some
No,
slack.
I'm talking about a 12-year-old. Talking about a 12-year-old, he should be able to.
Yeah, but there's a change there. They'll be all right. Then when they get a teenager, they get lazy and they can't be bothered to do anything.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. We should still be, So if he could do that at the same time, I'd cut him a little bit more slack. But no, he can't.
But it's things that are available to kids now that haven't been available to any previous generations.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why the generation of millennials, particularly millennials, adopted vinyl.
Yeah, that's made a massive comeback.
Because they've never had a physical format come out in their lifetime.
Yeah. So even you talk about people like 18, 19, 20 now.
Yeah, or even a little bit older, even up to the age of say 25, 28, 30, who are buying lots of vinyl.
CDs were already pretty much.
They were already there.
Yeah.
We were a long way towards being, streaming. I mean, file sharing has been around a long time. It's only recently we've worked out the mechanics of it.
So someone who's like 18 now probably will. Some of them have no experience of CDs.
No.
So that was the last major physical. But vinyl's always just been there, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Now it's definitely come back up.
But for the people who are embracing it, it's like a new format.
Yes, because some of their favourite artists are still putting stuff out on vinyl.
Yeah. Plus, it takes them to a place where there's a whole creative element to vinyl that was never available with CD.
And it's that sound quality.
It's the sound quality.
Where they've realised that with that analog aspect to it, there's nothing digital about it.
But most CD covers, most things on a CD cover invariably are a picture of the artist or the band, because there's a limit to what you can do on the size of a CD. Album covers aren't. That can be a piece of artwork because it's for vinyl. It's bigger.
And you used to open them up and you get posters inside and everything.
That kind of thing. So there's a whole creative element for the artists that they've never had before. Plus this whole thing of running order.
Yeah.
Nobody's had running
side
order.
One, side two.
Side one, side two. And
maybe if like some of those younger, the big artists now that the younger people are into, if they started pushing stuff like that, they would have the opportunity to push a whole younger generation towards a physical type.
And I think they will. The thing is, what might happen is we might lose the physical format, but we might embrace the ideas that go along with it. So running order might become a thing. If artists start to say, publicly, I want you to listen to the album from track 1 to track 10 because it's been sequenced to go that way.
Because if the artist says, I've written it this way,
and this is
the
way
it was
sequenced to be done.
Yeah.
And that was an art. Sequencing albums was an art that,
it was.
There
was a lot of
ridiculous
bands have hours, weeks going into this. Like, I think this should be the first track and it should lead into this. But why?
Well, George Martin, very famously on the Beatles album, started the start and the end of the side was always what he considered to be the strongest material. So if you go through the Beatles albums, number 1, number 5, number 6, and number 10 are often really, really strong tracks.
Was that where the term B-sides came from?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because I was trying to think what B-side would mean, but
I can only assume that on a single,
if people did
that was A and B.
The A-side would be your first half, which is your best stuff, and the B-side was the stuff that's
No, I think it must have been 7-inch singles. I think it just must have been the fact that 7-inch single invariably had something that didn't then appear on an album. Because obviously, but saying that, how long's B-side been a term? I don't know.
I remember Oasis's B-sides album was like hugely popular.
But that was stuff that never appeared. That was stuff that was, because Oasis did put material on the flip side of the 7-inch singles, because they always released vinyl.
Yeah, they did.
They always released vinyl.
Yeah.
And the flip side of the singles was always things that didn't appear on the albums.
One of the things
including the master plan.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm sure the younger generation will be glad they haven't got anything to do with is cassette tapes.
Though that's on the way back.
I've heard some people...
Cassette tapes are on the
but
way
no
back.
But no one's got anywhere to play them.
No, I don't quite know why
You have
cassette
to
tapes are on the way
get
back.
a Walkman or something.
There's...
They were just horrible. I've got no good memories with cassettes.
No, None. No, not when you're trying to actually... Particularly in cars.
Oh.
When it went on a long journey and you've just got tape
just
hanging out. You're just
flying
trying
out.
to...
You're like,
yeah.
oh no.
Yeah. I nearly said, you know what, they don't know they're born, do they? And I thought, oh, God.
Yeah, I've had to resist not saying that.
That's a real slippery slope.
But, yeah, so the other thing you do is you're the president of the MIA.
Yes.
What is the MIA?
The MIA is the Music Industries Association. And what that is, that's the trade body for music instrument manufacturers and music instrument retailers in the UK. So I should know how, it's old. I should know how old it is.
Did you get into this because of your role at Shure?
So through my role at Shure, I joined the board about 7 years ago. And being bluntly honest, because I didn't really know what they did.
Right.
And because the bill dropped onto it was one of those things that you hit a point in a company and suddenly invoices appear on your desk for you to sign and say it's okay to pay that. And the invoice for the MIA dropped on my desk, and I looked at it and I went, bloody hell, that's a few quid, isn't it? And that
you wanted to find out what is this for?
What is this for? Yeah. So I contacted, and I knew the guy who was the CEO, and I contacted him and said, Paul, why
are we paying this money for?
Why am I paying this money? And he told me, and I sort of said, well, okay, but is there not an opportunity? Maybe, is this? Could it do more? And if I'm asking the questions, are other people asking the same questions? And he said, well, come along to a board meeting. I came along to a board meeting, and then I really do suffer this thing where I'll be in a space with people and something will happen and somebody will say something or there'll be a conversation and then I just can't help myself. And then before long, it's like I've said, well, I'll do this, and I'll do that, and I'll do the other. And so...
You come out and go, why did I say that?
Yeah. So, and it happened about 3 years into my MIA kind of career. So I've been on the board for a while. I've been kind of sussing out what it was that the board did and what have you. And I thought to myself, well, I think we could go in a slightly different direction. And I made some notes, and I did the one thing you should never do. I put a PowerPoint presentation together.
Did you have one of those long pen sticks?
I never had one of them. Anyway, so I put this little, and it wasn't anything of anything. And it was a few images, nothing much. But I kind of was saying, well, look, maybe if we did this, and maybe if we did that. And you knew it was that moment. It was that moment where you're all standing in a line and somebody says, if you want to do something, take a step forward, and everybody else in the line takes one step backwards. So I kind of said, we should do this and we should do that, and what about if we did this? And like the reaction around the table was, that's the closest thing we've had to a plan for a little while. Brilliant, why don't you become the president? And that was 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago.
What is the role of the MIA?
So the MIA is you can think of it a bit like something like the Federation of Small Business. So the Federation of Small Business will provide a load of sort of services for its members. So it'll be bespoke insurances and help with credit card and rent and rent sort of appeals and all those kind of things. And we've always done those kind of things. If you go back in history, the MIA used to have a trade event, but the trade event became a thing of the past. There aren't many trade events in the music industry. So that the trade fair that they had, ended, and that was the bit really where the MI then has kind of started to struggle with who it is, because it used to be there. Like NAM is the US version of the MIA. It's the US trade body, but they have a big event. So with the MIA not having the event anymore, they ended up in a situation where it was literally, member benefits. And so you paid in a few quid, and then there was a package of benefits, and you theoretically would get more than the value of your membership if you took advantage of the benefits.
Right.
And then, which is all fine in a non-connected age, but when you get to as soon as we get into the compare the market type arrangement, virtually everybody can get a deal on anything. So the days of being able to get a deal on your insurance because you're an MIA member largely came to an end because in reality that market's long since gone. Plus the days of people making 50 and 60 and 70 point margins on anything meant that when you could throw 20% discount to an MIA member, you can't anymore because it's too cutthroat, it's too transparent. So what we've always done, and we do more now, is we do a lot of lobbying on behalf of the industry. So the situation with something called CITES, which is a world, a piece of global legislation which protects things like rosewood and ivory, and affects how you can use those in certain products. So it was that rosewood is something that you can't easily use anymore. Ivory is something you can't use anymore, but they're inherent to musical instruments. And what the MIA has done is worked on getting exemptions for things within the musical industry because it started to affect instruments that had already been built.
Right.
So it became virtually impossible to sell, or it would have been impossible for argument's sake to sell an instrument that had a proportion of ivory in it or had a proportion of rosewood in it. And
that could have become illegal.
It could have been illegal, yeah.
Ah, okay,
I mean, we could have been in a situation where literally instruments were being scrapped because of what they were made of, even though they'd been made 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Implications of that would be horrendous.
For the music industry, absolutely massive. Yeah. And it's particular, particular parts of particular instruments. It affects brass instruments and woodwind. All manner of things are affected by these pieces of sweeping legislation. Well, they're all made for the right reasons. We shouldn't be using rosewood in throwaway consumable items. It shouldn't be using furniture that's not going to last. But in the music industry, it was different because you're talking about things that had lives of hundreds of years.
And if there's only a small
portion
of things being made from that, they're not going to be they're not going to endanger anything or run out of anything.
And it became, there was a point where it was going to become very difficult for bands to work taking instruments abroad. Because you would have you needed a passport for the instrument, and it was possible the instrument could have been impounded depending on where you went. So MIA lobbied on things like that. They lobby on things like the Music Venue Trust. They lobby on behalf of education bodies for music in the curriculum. So we ultimately want to promote and protect music makers, and by default then the people who make the instruments and sell the instruments, because there's more people making music, then there are more people buying guitars, there are more people buying drums, there are more people buying clarinets, and there are more people building and retailing those things. So a lot of it is lobbying, and a lot of it now is communication. So the MIA has the largest newsletter, trade newsletter for the industry, and a lot of it is about keeping people informed of what's going on and helping them to work, so helping retailers with things that are right. So we ran a couple of sessions on how Brexit would affect the industry.
I was going to ask that,
Yeah, we run a lot of conferences and what have you about...
Because they've got their own podcast.
They have, though. That's kind of...
It seemed like a series.
It was 4 episodes of a specific event, and
I listened to them. They're very useful.
Yeah, there was a good event. It was a good event, and I've completely lost it. Yeah, so there's a couple of series of Behind the Beat, which is my podcast, planned, and it's just a case of getting the logistics together because it's a relatively small organisation. So
that's a good example of something like that. A podcast was a great outlet for them.
Well, funnily enough, that was one of one of the things I had put on my list of things to do. Was we need to do a podcast?
Yeah.
Because when you do a newsletter, as we do, what doesn't get consumed in a newsletter is the long read. So you get somebody to write something for you, and it's a few thousand words, and they just don't get the click through.
No.
Whereas you will get people. So we were having more people engaged with the podcast.
Are a specific type of person who they're choosing what to download. So they're obviously going to listen to it all.
Those podcasts were done with the mics in the room. I edited them.
It was good because it's always difficult. A lot of them do they don't do it from the mixing desk.
No,
they don't have mics in front of every guest. Sometimes it's a bit shouty.
I asked for that specifically so I could take the audio feed.
Seriously affect your content otherwise.
Well, to be fair, that's something that actually when we put it out, I was happy enough with the content. There's a lot of room noise, but I was happy enough with the content.
Works.
Bearing in mind, effectively, the content was free.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like was because when you've got a day that's based around an event and you're just broadcasting an event, then you can't control the length. So one of them was about an hour and a half long, and I would have preferred it to have been a bit shorter, but that's how long the panel session was.
You just break it up in small parts.
And so, I did. I put a couple of little breaks in there to split it up, just to give people a moment. But no, there's a whole series of behind the beat planned, and it's just resource. But yeah, it just effectively it became a more consumable version of the newsletter for the long read. So it's going to replace the long read on the newsletter, basically.
Because podcast listeners are a very specific type of people. I think they look for content like that. They want to be more involved in it.
Well, the other reason why I loved it for the MI industry was so many people in the music industry work on the road. Yeah. So already you've got a whole layer of the industry that is doing a lot of travelling.
I think that's one of the most places people listen.
Yeah. So it just became an easy thing to say, actually, and we know we've got great engagement with the newsletter. I know that of the people, within the industry, so I know that, the guy that runs Korg and the guy that, is one of the top two guys in the in Gear for Music, and I know that the guys, I can list a load of people and say, I know they read the newsletter. And I also know that they're all podcast junkies, so that in reality it's a bit of an easy win. But it's now just about finding the time to pad it out. So the reason why we did those first 4 was just to actually learn a few of those lessons, just get it out there, get a bit of an identity.
Definitely the way to do it.
And now
that's why I tell people who are thinking about doing stuff like that, just do it.
We now need to backfill. We now to backfill the content, which is the plan. Really, is the plan for the next few months. And we've got what would be the equivalent of 2, because the beauty with that is that we can do that a little bit seasonal. We can take our breaks from that.
That's what's the seasons thing is probably one of the best things that's come in for a lot of people.
Yeah,
because it gives you have an end point and a gap before you come back.
Well, we've got 2 seasons planned for that. Which and the beauty for our industry is it can be a mix of interviews and it can be a mix of topics. Yeah. So it's just a case of when that runs. So it's MIA predominantly lobbying and information share.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
It's great, and it's. The music instrument industry is, be it rock and roll or be it sort of band and orchestra. It's a real small community. It's a real
needs support.
Yes, it does. It really does, and it doesn't get a lot of support. And I think we had for a lot of, we've been pivotal to the legislation that's gone through with regard to the agent of change for music venues. So basically, that means that it used to be. In fact, I was chatting to somebody in Germany about this, and it's still the thing in Germany. If a developer builds a development in an area of a city where there's a music venue, because it's urban renewal or whatever it is, and then enough of the residents complain about the venue, then venues were getting shut down. And now what with the MIA's been part of a move to basically say that actually if a developer works in a space with an existing venue, then there is nothing that a new development can do to affect the existing venue.
That's the way it should be.
But that's not the way it works in Germany. And I was chatting to somebody about this in Germany who said, no, the law is still on the side of the developer. So if a developer comes in, not only
have we got that here?
No, we didn't.
So.
It was more individual cases, and what's now has been
the way it should be.
Yeah. Because we've got to protect the venues.
Otherwise, there'll be no venues.
Well, this is the thing. It was somebody, I don't know who it was, listed somebody on 6, I think, listed a whole load of venues that were now not there, and then listed the bands that he'd seen in those venues for the first time. And he was listing the likes of Oasis and Blur and Coldplay and what have you. And he just went through this list of people that this is where he saw those people for the first time. And you look and go, well, where's the next generation?
Exactly. Well, it's like those people who move into next to a pub and then they start complaining about
the
noise. It's like, what do you expect?
Yeah, it was there, but I don't know. But yeah, so it's a support. The trade bodies there is a support to people in that space, and really we see that lobbying and also working towards best practice in the industry is the main focus for where we are now. But it isn't where we used to be. So it's gone through a lot of change in the last 3 or 4 years.
Some of it because of you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been part of that process.
Clearly, they needed ideas. They needed
and
strategies.
I think as there's been a generational shift in the industry. Full stop. A lot of people who owned businesses even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, who'd been in place for a lot of years. Are now retiring, and I think the industry is going to change on the back of it.
Every generation, there's a big shift in most things, I think.
But I think in the music industry, what's happened is you've got a lot of people who are now moving to one side who actually were the founding person in that organisation. And I think the thing is that that's great, and I'm not saying that people have hung around too long, because it's your thing. You stay as long as you want to. But the generation that comes after you that isn't quite as emotionally attached to what you're doing in quite the same way will look at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's probably happening a little bit in the sector now. A lot of people who started companies have now sold those companies, or they've passed them on. And I think now it's a different ethos that's coming through, and I think that will be positive. But I think that means there'll be a lot of change, particularly in the next 3 or 4 years. I think there's going to be a lot of change in the music industry in terms of the manufacture side of instruments and that part of the industry.
Like, we still don't know how Brexit's fully going to affect everything, do we?
No, we haven't got a clue. Though I can't see how it's going to end well, but that is a little bit of my personal views on the subject.
But in terms of, like, for musicians, like...
that's already a problem.
Having to get a different visa for every... Like, in Europe.
Well, the creative industries sector is the biggest contributor to GB PLC. So, and that's going to be a huge problem. If people can't move freely around Europe, for all the arts and for all the things they support, then it's a huge problem.
Yeah, because some of them just won't.
No, and the UK's always been an attractive place for musicians, for dancers, for for playwrights, for authors, for whatever it might be, for artists, and that is going to change, and they will end up. The film industry is going to take a hell of a bang if it's difficult to get in and out. And I don't see how it's going to be easy.
No.
So
it's just such an unknown. Not really been in this situation before.
And I say creative arts is going to take a battering. And creative arts is one of the part. I mean, you look at the creative industries, and they are. I mean, if you did a straw poll, it's sort of 95% in favour of being part of the EU, in favour of remaining. Just because of the the demographic and the spread of that particular industry.
Yeah, so. I don't know. It worries me a bit, but I'm sure it'll get. In the end, we'll come to some sort of level playing field. We'll have to, otherwise it'll just become so overcomplicated. The
hope is long term that what will win out is the fact that kids will always want to pick up guitars, and they'll always want to pick up X, Y, and Z, and the teenage angst isn't going to go away, and kids are always going to have something that they want to push back against, and hopefully that will continue to be done through music.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say hopefully it'll be continued to, because there are more mediums available for kids to express themselves now than there ever have been.
Way more.
And that's the only thing about whether it will be music they express themselves through, or whether they express themselves even just directly. Even, you take the Greta Thunberg as an example. I mean, it might just be direct action. They might bypass talking about politics through music and just start proclaiming about politics in their own right, and that might happen. I don't know, but we've got to hope that kids will always want to pick up a guitar and get angry about something. And I mean that in the most creative and the most positive sense.
Because something good always comes from that.
Because something good always comes from that.
It has for generations.
Yes, and
you
shouldn't
don't want
stop.
that to stop. Yeah.
No, you don't want it to stop, and we need to make sure there are no barriers to that. Which means that we need a vibrant retail sector, because kids need somewhere to go and play instruments and take them off the wall, and you need to be able to go and sit. 14-year-old lads from school need to be able to go and find somewhere to sit round and and play death metal or whatever it might be, because that's and that's kind of stereotypical in terms of lads. I don't mean in that way round, though actually bizarrely it is a big thing about about why there aren't as many females going into music stores as perhaps should be, but I think that's more to the environment than anything else.
There aren't people in general, as many people in general going to music stores. I mean, I had the guys from HMV on the last episode, and I mean, they're doing great. Our one in Carlisle is doing great things to galvanise the local scene.
Really interesting
very different things, thinking outside the box. But that could just be taken away any second, because they're the last remaining chain store. They're only down to 100 now. Yeah. Hopefully that minimising it and bringing it down to a small scale will help it,
but if it
prosper.
Well, music stores and music instrument stores are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And we need that point. We need to be able to do what I did when I was that age, which is go and hang around in a music store for most of us.
Yeah, it needs to be like the what it is needs to change.
Yes.
Not just a place that just sells stuff and that's it.
No,
it needs to be.
Got to be a hub.
Yeah, it has to have other things. Yeah, like it could incorporate places like listen to music, play music. All sorts of stuff.
That's where you find your drummer, and that's where you when you buy your first guitar, and then you meet the guy that's going to be or girl that's going to be the drummer in the band, and all those kind of things, and that needs to still be there, which means we need a vibrant sector, which means all the pieces need to fit together. There's got to be somewhere to play. There's got to be somewhere to buy the stuff. There's got to be somewhere to rehearse. There's got to be somewhere to hang out.
Yeah, not online. Something that's not online.
Not online. Well, it doesn't. The creative process, particularly for music, and I know I get shot down this, and people say, no, you can do it, and 5G and this, that, and the other, and so on. And yes, I get that, but it's not the same. It's not the same as when you sit down in a room with somebody with a couple of instruments and you jam away for 4 or 5 hours, and you can't.
No.
And it's a special thing.
Yeah.
And that's a journey that, and as I say, we just need for this industry, we just need kids to be doing that and getting angry and engaged about stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, have you any other ideas for other podcasts that you would do, or any changes that you would make in your podcast? Like, would you interview someone?
Yes, absolutely. And I would probably be a different thing. I think.
Yeah, like a different.
I would have to. Yeah, but I'd happily do that. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm living through that a different way, because having done the initial interviews for the Guitar Show one, that's obviously a fledgling idea at the moment. Having done stuff with Signal Path for sure, and having done, and there's a potential for doing that with the MIA, with Behind the Beat. Yeah. So I probably might incorporate that in through other projects that I'm involved in.
Yeah.
But I'd love to do one where I just sat down and spoke with people that I found.
Because obviously you've been in the industry, you've got connections.
Yeah.
That's how I started. I had like 20 people, and I was like, who I never got a chance to talk to, because we were always working. And it's either my gig or it was their gig, and you got the same pleasantries. And but whenever you did get that extra 5 minutes, you'd have a great conversation with them. But then they've got to go, or I've got to go.
And I think it's one of those things. I do think it is addictive. I do think when you start to talk to people, and you really, particularly when you get 10, 15 minutes in and you really start to unearth stuff, and people really let the barriers down, I think that's absolutely fascinating.
And I think revolutions can happen from more people sitting down and talking. Yeah. And the fact that you can record it and other people can hear it now, there's a lot of responsibility with that.
What podcast has done I think it's reminded everybody that you don't need to sit and listen to somebody who's uber famous. It's actually possible just to sit and listen to just people who talking about the things that Jurgen Klopp did something really classy the other day, because somebody asked him about coronavirus.
Yeah.
And he just turned around and said, "Why are you asking me? I'm not an expert. I'm a football guy. You shouldn't be asking me. You should be asking somebody who knows about this stuff, because my opinions on this, not only are they not relevant, they're not helpful." And that's absolutely great. Yeah. And we actually need people in the public eye to talk about the things that they do, but and maybe it's nice to understand that person a little bit more, but we don't need to ask that person's opinion on everything under the sun.
No.
And we've found ourselves doing that. And I think podcasting is helping people just listen to other people, just talk about stuff.
Because there'll always be someone who can relate to whatever you're talking about, always. Yes. And it might make people think differently, or consider things that they haven't thought about, or be challenged.
The other thing is, I change my mind all the time. Absolutely,
I think it's good to change your mind.
And I am influenced by. So I could go away from this, and somebody could get back in touch and say, you said that thing, and I thought that was really stupid. I didn't think you'd thought that out at all, because of da-da-da-da. And at that point you might go, You know what? You're absolutely right.
Mm.
I shot from
I think
the
that's a
hip.
good quality to have.
Yeah,
To be
absolutely.
able to look at yourself and go, maybe I got that wrong.
I got that wrong.
Whereas, not to go into politics, but these people who just their mind cannot be changed,
Yeah.
even with facts
Yeah.
or research,
Particularly
or
with facts.
stats.
Particularly with facts. Though, to be fair, coronavirus might help us because we might start listening to experts again.
Yeah, well, at some point we'll probably have to. Those staunch people who just, I don't know, they don't accept criticism, even if it's right, it's accurate. They just, I think that's bad, and podcasting could potentially help with that.
I think it will. I think it's good for us as human beings to listen to a nuanced conversation, to listen to a thought-out argument, to listen to two people who might disagree, who might then arrive at a different place by the end of the conversation.
Or come to a middle ground.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
That can't do us any harm.
No. And it's good to be challenged sometimes, or to have someone who's completely, you could have someone who you completely disagree with, but you'll find something in the middle. Or they might change your mind, or you might change their mind.
The thing I said earlier about every form of social media seems to be about shouting, but I think it's just because everything's about shouting now.
Yeah.
We haven't.
It's got so noisy.
It's the only discourse it's a form of discourse we seem to have got. We've got left, and it's funny because I stopped myself doing it. So I'll go on. It's the easiest thing in the world, particularly on Twitter, particularly if you follow politics, to read what somebody's written and a viewpoint that you might find not only offensive but also ridiculous. It's the easiest thing in the world to put something sarcastic on there, or just to throw an insult out.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of times that I've stopped myself doing it because I thought I was on the right side of the moral argument. It's okay to then go, yes, but you're a bit of a bellend, so keep your opinions to yourself. But you've got to stop yourself doing that, because that's not helping.
No.
And if everybody stopped that reaction, then
people don't listen.
No, they don't.
They don't listen, because if someone just is saying something that's on the other side, or they've already made their mind up that they're going to disagree before they start talking, that's terrible.
No,
that's not good at all.
But we've got to stop. The first thing we've got to do is, apart from stop shouting, the first thing we've got to do is stop responding with anything that doesn't add to the conversation.
You come across some people, that's all they do.
That's all they do. That's absolutely all they do. We had a situation with the MIA where we had a response to something we'd put out, and it very quickly escalated. And it escalated into a situation that nobody was going to win, because it was a piece of information that went out that was then misinterpreted, and then a load of people who had a particular cause in mind just piled in.
Yeah.
And what we ended up doing was, there was one person who was at the centre of it, and we ended up contacting that person and saying, look, help us understand. You've got a point of view, so can you help us understand how we could address this? Because we accept we've put something out there. It's been misinterpreted, but there's still opportunity for us to maybe improve how we do the things that we do. Help us understand how we can be better in this space. And never heard a word back from that person. And the thing there is, if you're going to stand
You couldn't
there,
have handled that better.
No, but if that's where you want that person to stand up and say, I do believe in this issue, to the point where I'm now going to very quietly, with no publicity, I'm going to come and spend some time, because we invited that person to come and spend some time with us. But we took it all offline. It was like, if you really mean
So they didn't want to do it without an audience.
They didn't want to do it without us.
So they've got an agenda.
And that's the bit that we've now got to start to say. If you've really got an issue with something, then let's start to have quiet, offline discussions about these things.
You're right. It is all about shouting and headlines.
Yeah.
People, we're becoming a generation who they'll see something in a headline and they won't even read the article.
No.
They'll just go with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you do read the article after the headline, you go, why that
headline
makes
doesn't make no sense.
It's just to get clicks or sell copies.
No. And
I hate that.
And another great thing about podcasts is clickbait doesn't seem to be a thing.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't think that you see a lot of people who sensationalise the content of their podcast to try and get more people to listen to it. I think as a format, it's just more genuine.
Yeah.
I think people...
They'll do clips, but it'll be a clip of...
Yes.
Nothing out of the ordinary, just a good conversation.
You can't sensationalize a clip of audio. I mean, you can, you could potentially manufacture a piece of audio so it wasn't actually what was said, but in reality, you're not going to do that.
And even if you did, or you could, it's not going to help you.
No. So I think there is just, I mean, for me, there's an honesty and an integrity to a podcast, which is one of the reasons why I absolutely love it. There's an intimacy to it that I think is great.
It's very rare these days.
Very rare. There's an accessibility to it in terms of, particularly because for a lot of people, it's an accompaniment to something in their life, and it's actually the positive accompaniment. If you're going to the gym, the podcast's the bit that get you through. If you're going to take the dog for a walk, it gets you through.
A long drive.
It gets you through.
Absolutely.
So I think if you look at the integrity and the
but you're also getting something out of it.
Oh, of course you are.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
You're hearing a great story, or you're hearing philosophies or history.
You're broadening. You're broadening your perspective, and
Definitely.
that's not a bad thing. And I think the thing is, unlike social media, with a lot of with a lot of social media, what you do is you cocoon yourself into a load of opinions that are exactly the same as your own. So all that you do is you actually.
Well,
you're just reinforcing your own opinion all the time. With a podcast,
which is often pointless.
Exactly. With a podcast, you're having a wider discussion.
Which is why, you have a lot. I know some good podcasts that will have someone from the opposite side, and they'll have a good discussion, and they won't fall out.
And that's fine. The problem is that, say, with the mainstream media, what we've done.
But then you get labelled sometimes.
But I think with the mainstream media, what we've done is we've ended up, because it's become soundbitey. Particularly in politics, what you've ended up with is one person from the extreme of one argument, one from the other extreme of the argument, and for 3 minutes they're allowed to shout at each other.
Yeah.
That's not... If you did that on a podcast, you wouldn't do that.
No. Your audience wouldn't like it either.
No, you'd get people with a much more balanced view of the...
Yeah, it's like the Joe Rogan podcast, the biggest podcast in the world. He used to get, not so much now, but at the beginning, when he would have someone from a certain political... team, and then he would have another. He would start getting labelled as he support them. Yeah. But no, I just want to talk to them. I have the right to do that, and that's the best thing you can do. Because then he would just counter it by having someone the opposite in. Well, what are you going to say about me now?
I'll give you an example of, and it's years ago this happened, but I was listening to the radio and they were talking about inheritance tax, and there was a guy came on. And basically, everybody who came on was inheritance tax is a bad thing. It's a bad thing. I've already paid tax on that money. It's a bad thing. You can't tax me twice. You can't tax me twice. You can't tax. It's already paid my tax. You can't. It's wrong. And the overwhelming view, 95% of the people who were coming onto this phone-in show, bad thing. Got to go. All sides of the political spectrum. And this guy came on, and he said he's an accountant, and he came on to defend inheritance tax. And I was sat there thinking, well, this is just going to be hilarious, because I was firmly in the camp of...
How can you defend it?
How can you defend something that's indefensible? And he came on and he said, look, essentially, somebody who potentially has never worked a day in their life has been gifted £1 million and not done a penny for it, not done anything for it at all, not made one contribution to the economy for that money. It is purely a gift. If he'd been out to earn that money, he would have been taxed on it. I absolutely accept the person who's earned it shouldn't have been taxed on it again. And if they'd spent it, it wouldn't have been taxed again, apart from VAT on whatever they bought. But this person over here who's just been given it, why shouldn't that person pay tax on that money? Because in reality, that person hasn't done anything for it. And I actually changed my opinion on the base of that.
That's why you should never dismiss someone from the other side, because you never know what they're going to say. You should be open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
I thought about it again, and it made me realise that I wasn't leaving anything to my kids, and I was just going to spend it all. And that's the way around the argument.
And I think that's a good way to end.
Yes, yeah.
We've been going 2 hours.
Have we really?
Yeah.
Oh, good grief.
Over 2 hours.
9:15.
But I'm so glad you made the journey.
Oh, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely have you back on.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Can you move a bit closer?
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Well, I'll have you back in the summer sometime. The weather is beautiful here.
Yeah. Right. Well, thanks a lot.
No, thank you very much.
Take care.